He was 30 seconds from dying inside his own car, and the only person who knew it was a black woman from Atlanta who wasn't supposed to be anywhere near him. In the underground parking garage of the most exclusive hotel in downtown Seoul, a man who had survived 2 assassination attempts, 3 federal investigations, and 17 years of the most brutal organized crime wars in East Asian history was about to be killed by someone he had raised with his own hands. He didn't know that yet. She did. If this story hits something in you, like it, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches. Now let's get into it. The garage smelled like exhaust and money. That particular combination, diesel residue baked into poured concrete, overlaid with the ghost of expensive leather interiors and the faint chemical sweetness of high-end tire rubber, was something Amara Brooks had cataloged without ever meaning to. 3 years of working the overnight audit shift at the Grand Siorak Hotel had turned her into a creature of involuntary observation. She noticed things. She filed them away in some back room of her mind where useful information went to wait. Right now, the most useful thing she had noticed was the left ear of the man sitting in the driver's seat of the black-armored Hyena S600 idling in spot B7. It was perfect, smooth, unblemished. The ear of a man who had never taken a serious blow to the side of his head in his life. Park Min-soo's left ear looked like someone had crumpled a piece of paper and then tried, unsuccessfully, to flatten it back out. 14 years as a semi-professional boxer before a career-ending hand injury had reshaped the cartilage permanently. Amara had noticed it the first week she started working here, the same way she'd noticed the particular way Min-soo always checked the rear passenger door handle twice before he considered it secured, the same way she'd noticed he kept a photograph of his daughter tucked into the sun visor on the driver's side. Small things. Irrelevant things. Until tonight, when they were the only things that mattered. She stood in the shadow between a concrete pillar and a maintenance access door, holding a manila envelope against her chest with both hands, her heart hitting the inside of her ribs so hard she was half convinced the man 20 feet away could hear it. She had been standing here for 11 minutes. She had almost walked out twice. The third time she'd almost walked out, she'd gotten as far as the maintenance stairwell door before stopping, her hand flat against the cold steel, thinking about the footage she had watched 4 times in the past 6 hours. Thinking about what she'd seen Kang Seong-ho do with his phone. She pushed away from the stairwell door and waited. Kang Ji-tae came through the garage entrance at 11:47 p.m., exactly on schedule. That was another thing Amara had cataloged without meaning to. The man was pathologically punctual. 2 years of cross-referencing the hotel's security log timestamps against parking garage entry records, purely because she was bored during the dead hours between 2 and 4 in the morning and the hotel's audit software was slow, had given her an almost embarrassingly detailed picture of Kang Ji-tae's nightly rhythms. He came down to the garage between 11:40 and 11:55 every night he stayed at the hotel. He always wore the same dark wool overcoat on cool evenings, a different cut, but the same charcoal color. He always walked with 2 security personnel flanking him, never more, because Ji-tae considered visible security a form of weakness that invited challenges from people trying to measure the size of your fear. She knew things about this man she had no business knowing. She had never spoken a word to him. He was 51 feet away. Then 40. Then 30. And the 2 men flanking him had already clocked her. She saw it happen. The slight shift in their posture. The way the one on the left let his jacket fall open just a fraction. And she knew she had maybe 3 seconds before they physically blocked her from getting anywhere near him. She stepped out from the shadow. "Don't unlock the car." Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Flat. American. Completely wrong for this place and this moment in a way that froze everyone for just a fraction of a second. Not because of what she said, but because of what she sounded like saying it. A black woman in a hotel staff lanyard, standing in a parking garage at midnight, telling Kang Ji-tae what not to do. The security personnel moved immediately. The one on the left, tall, thick through the shoulders, moving with the economical efficiency of someone who had trained this exact response until it was reflex, had her by the upper arm before she'd completed her second breath. Ji-tae had already pulled the key fob from his coat pocket. "The man waiting inside isn't your driver," Amara said. The security man's grip tightened. Ji-tae hadn't looked at her yet. He was looking at the car. at the silhouette visible through the darkened rear window of the driver's compartment, doing some internal calculation she couldn't read. "Mr. Kang." Her voice stayed flat. She needed it flat. If it shook even slightly, she was finished, because she would sound exactly like what a piece of her was, a 31-year-old accountant from Atlanta, Georgia, who had somehow gotten herself involved in something catastrophically above her pay grade. "Minsu's left ear. Look at the driver's left ear." Silence. The security man on her arm didn't move. The other one had positioned himself directly between her and Jitai with the practiced ease of someone who did this for a living. Jitai still hadn't looked at her, but he also hadn't pressed the fob. 30 seconds passed. Maybe 40. The idling Hyena S600 sat there in the fluorescent light of the garage, engine turning over with a sound like quiet, expensive breathing. Then Kang Jitai turned and looked at her for the first time. She had seen him on the hotel's security monitors dozens of times. She had read enough about him online, in the years before she'd taken this job, to know that his reputation preceded him the way a weather system preceded a hurricane, as something that changed the atmospheric pressure in a room before it actually arrived. What she hadn't accounted for was the specific quality of stillness about him. He was a compact man, not especially tall, with a face that had aged into something architectural, strong planes and angles, dark eyes that had seen enough to stop being surprised by most of it. He looked at her the way she imagined a very experienced surgeon might look at an unexpected lab result. Not alarmed, not dismissive. Processing. "His ear," Jitai said. His English was precise and almost entirely unaccented, which she hadn't expected. "Why his ear?" 14 years as a boxer. His left ear is cauliflower. The man in your car has a perfect ear." Another silence. Longer this time. Jitai's eyes moved to the car. Amara watched him do what she had already done. Look at the driver's silhouette through the darkened glass, trying to resolve the angle, trying to see what she was describing. The garage lighting wasn't ideal. The window tinting made it worse. But if he was close enough, if he was looking for it now that she'd named it, "Hyun-soo," Jitai said quietly. The security man on her arm didn't move, but something changed in the configuration of the three of them. Jitai said something in Korean, too fast and too low for Amara to follow, and then there was movement. Not toward the car, but toward the left, toward the pillar she'd been hiding behind, which gave Hyun-soo, or whoever he was, a better sightline to the driver's side. 5 more seconds. Then Hyun-soo said one word in Korean that Amara didn't know, but understood completely from the tone. Jitai turned back to her. "You have something in that envelope." It wasn't a question. She held it out. The security man on her arm released her, and Jitai took the envelope himself, which surprised her. She'd expected one of the guards to take it, to open it, to assess it first. Instead, he broke the seal himself, withdrew the folded papers inside, and looked at the first page for a long time. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "The hotel's audit system. I'm the night auditor. There's a secondary transit coordination platform embedded in our event management software. It's used for VIP scheduling. Someone accessed it 6 days ago using credentials assigned to the hotel's executive concierge team and entered a series of encrypted transportation requests." She kept her voice factual, clinical, the same voice she used when she was explaining a discrepancy in the monthly accounts to the financial manager. "The requests were tied to your daily schedule, vehicle assignments, routing information, time to the minute." Jitai turned to the next page. Amara knew what was on it. She had printed it herself, an hour ago, in the business center on the 4th floor because she didn't trust the printer in the audit office. "The authorization credentials," he said. "Yes. These belong to a member of my own organization." "I know." He looked up at her. "You know who this person is." "I recognize the personal email address used to activate the secondary authorization layer. It appears in your hotel reservation profile as an emergency contact." Jitai was quiet for a moment that stretched long enough to make the back of Amara's neck prickle. Then he said, very quietly, something in Korean that she absolutely did not understand, but which made both security men go completely still. "There's one more thing," she said, "in the envelope. Last page." He found it, a single printed screenshot. Timestamp, camera designation, image quality imperfect, but entirely legible. A man seated at a table in one of the hotel's private dining rooms. speaking across from two individuals she didn't recognize. The man's face was clearly visible. His expression was calm, almost pleasant. Jitai looked at the photograph for a very long time. Amara had seen grief do strange things to people's faces over the years. She had seen it flatten them, cave them in, pull the structure out from behind the skin. What happened to Jitai's face was different from all of those. It went entirely inward. Every surface expression cleared away until what was left was something she couldn't read and didn't want to. "When was this taken?" he asked. 48 hours ago. Private dining room C, 3rd floor. I pulled it from the archived footage this evening." Jitai slid the photograph back into the envelope with the same deliberate care he'd used to remove it, which was somehow more unnerving than if he'd crumpled it or thrown it. He folded the envelope in half and held it at his side. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amara Brooks." "How long have you worked here, Ms. Brooks?" 3 years. "Why are you showing me this?" He wasn't being rhetorical. The question was genuine, direct, the kind of question that expected an actual answer. She'd thought about how to answer that question for the last 6 hours, ever since she'd pulled up the surveillance archive and seen what she'd seen and understood what it meant. And she still hadn't found an answer that felt entirely honest. "Because I couldn't not," she said. Jitai looked at her for another moment. Then he said, "There's a maintenance corridor through that door. Where does it go?" The maintenance corridors beneath the Grand Seorak ran like a shadow architecture beneath the hotel's visible structure. Narrower, uglier, lit by industrial fluorescence on a separate circuit from the guest floors, smelling of cleaning chemicals and the particular staleness of air that moved in loops without ever quite reaching the outside. Amara had learned them in pieces over 3 years, the way you learn any space you inhabit during the hours when no one else is paying attention. She knew which junctions led to the service elevator bays, which passages ran parallel to the loading docks, which maintenance room in the sub-basement had a window that looked out onto the parking garage through a ventilation grill. She led Jitai and his 2 security personnel through 3 levels of corridor in 4 minutes. Nobody spoke. The security men moved in a professional silence that had its own texture, present without being intrusive, alert in a way that communicated readiness without broadcasting anxiety. Jitai walked with the focused pace of a man relocating from one position of control to another, not fleeing, not rushing, simply executing a route change with the economy of someone who had spent a lifetime treating sudden danger as a logistical problem. In the sub-basement, in the maintenance room that smelled of machine oil and old paint, Amara stopped at the workbench she'd used earlier and pulled her laptop from the bag she'd left there 2 hours ago. She opened it, brought up the interface she'd been working in, and turned it toward Jitai. "This is the secondary transit coordination platform," she said. "It's layered inside the hotel's event management system. Most of the staff don't know it exists. It's a legacy integration from when the hotel was acquired 7 years ago. Whoever accessed it knew where to look." Jitai studied the screen. "Show me the access records." She walked him through it. The initial login, time-stamped at 2:14 a.m. 6 days prior, using credentials that bypassed the standard concierge authentication through what appeared to be an administrative override code. The string of transportation requests entered over the following 40 minutes. The vehicle specifications: armored sedan, Hyena S600, registration matching Jitai's own fleet designation. The routing information, structured as a standard executive transfer, but modified at 3 specific points along the Han River crossing route. The timing parameters, calibrated to the 90-second precision of Jitai's observed schedule. And then the final entry, a maintenance note attached to the vehicle designation, added 3 days later, reading only, "Interior modification complete, delivery confirmed." Jitai read that last line twice. His breathing didn't change. His face didn't change. But Amara had been watching people at 3 in the morning for 3 years, and she had developed a fine sensitivity to the particular stillness that a person produced when they were containing something enormous. She saw it in him now, a quality of internal pressure held perfectly behind the surface. "The authorization credential layer," he said. "You said you recognized the email address." "Yes. Say the name." Amara hesitated for exactly half a second. "Kang Seung-ho," she said. The room was quiet except for the distant cycling of the building's HVAC system. One of the security men, the one called Hyun-soo, inhaled sharply through his nose. The other one went very still in a different way, the way of someone disciplining a reaction. Jitai said nothing for a long time. "You're certain," he said finally. It wasn't quite a question. The email address is registered to a personal device under that name. It appears in your hotel profile as emergency contact. She paused. I ran the access credential against the hotel's guest registration database. There was a match to a room booked under a corporate alias 4 days ago. Same floor as your penthouse. I can show you the printout. Jitai didn't ask to see the printout. He was somewhere else. Not physically, but in the way of a man whose mind was conducting an internal audit of everything he thought he knew, running every memory and interaction through a new filter, seeing which ones changed their meaning when you looked at them differently. Amara gave him the silence. She was good at silence. Silence was most of what her job required. After a long moment, Jitai said, "The platform. Does it show who gave him the administrative override code? That's what I wanted to get to." Amara pulled up a secondary window. The override code was generated from an external IP address registered to a corporate entity, Marchetti Executive Advisory, based in Geneva. It's a consultancy firm officially. Client advisory services, executive risk management, strategic transitions. She paused. I dug a little deeper. 3 of their listed corporate clients in the past 4 years, a pharmaceutical CEO in Lyon, a tech company chairman in Frankfurt, a private equity director in Brussels, each died in vehicle-related incidents within 60 days of engaging the firm's services. In each case, their companies experienced significant ownership restructuring immediately after their deaths. Jitai turned to look at her. Really look at her. Not the processing look from the parking garage, but something more deliberate. You found this tonight? I found the transit platform entries tonight. I found Marchetti 3 weeks ago. She held his gaze. I work with financial data professionally, Mr. Kang. I noticed an anomaly in the hotel's external booking records last month. A series of consultancy invoices billed through an offshore administrative account associated with your organization's executive floor bookings. I started following the thread because that's what I do. I didn't know where it led until tonight. Jitai absorbed that. 3 weeks, he said. I didn't know what I had for the first 2 weeks. I thought it was a billing irregularity. When I understood what I was actually looking at, She stopped, allowed herself a moment of honesty that felt like stepping off a curb in the dark. I spent a week not knowing what to do with it. Why? The question landed simply, without weight, but it had weight. Because I'm a foreign national with no standing here, she said. Because the people involved aren't the kind of people who respond well to interference. Because I had no way of knowing who I could trust. She looked at him steadily. And because I wasn't certain, until tonight, that you weren't involved yourself. That landed. She watched it land. Jitai's expression didn't shift. She was starting to understand that his face was a controlled instrument, not an involuntary display. But there was a fractional change in the quality of his attention, something that acknowledged the honesty of what she'd said. And now? He asked. Now someone tried to kill you tonight using a plan coordinated through your own organization and your own hotel. That answers my question about your involvement. Jitai was quiet again. Then, where's Min-Soo? That's the other thing. She navigated to a third window on her laptop, the hotel's internal staff management system, accessible from the audit terminal during overnight hours for payroll verification purposes, another legacy access point that the hotel's IT department hadn't rationalized. At 10:55 p.m. tonight, there was a badge swipe registered to Min-Soo's staff credential at the service entrance on level B2. 40 minutes ago, the same credential was used to access the uniform storage room on that level. There's been no outbound scan. Hyun-Soo moved without being told. He said something quick and low in Korean, and Jitai nodded once. There are 3 access points from that corridor, Amara said, and then she stopped herself because Hyun-Soo was already moving and she realized she was about to give directions to men who knew this hotel better than she did, which was almost certainly not true. I can pull the camera feeds for that section. Jitai looked at her. Do it. Chuck. They found Min-Soo alive. That was the first thing, and it mattered. Amara could see that it mattered to Jitai in a way that was not primarily tactical. The relief that moved through the older man's face when Hyun-Soo's voice crackled through his earpiece was brief and immediately subsumed by everything else. But it was real. The second thing was what Min-soo told them when Hyun-soo brought him to the sub-basement maintenance room, that he had been approached by a hotel staff member at 10:30 p.m., told there was a building security issue requiring all vehicle personnel to temporarily relocate to the staff holding area on B2, that the staff member had a hotel badge, a professional manner, and a document that looked official, that Min-soo had gone without resisting because there was no apparent reason not to, that he had understood something was wrong approximately 15 minutes later when no one came to release him and the door wouldn't open from the inside. Min-soo was in his mid-40s, compact and weather-beaten, with the particular physical economy of men who had spent years in physical professions and then transitioned into something that required a different kind of fitness. His left ear was unmistakably what it was. He looked at Jitai with an expression that contained equal parts relief, professional mortification, and something else, a quiet gratitude that had no immediate outlet. Jitai spoke to him briefly in Korean. Min-soo answered, glanced once at Amara, a look that was measuring without being hostile, and then nodded. Amara kept her attention on her laptop screen, giving them a partial privacy that the room's size didn't fully allow. She was pulling the B-level camera archive, looking for the staff member who had directed Min-soo, building a visual record of the timeline that she suspected was going to matter enormously in the next several hours. Miss Brooks. She looked up. Jitai was watching her again. The man in the car, he said. The one waiting in my vehicle. Still there, as of 12 minutes ago? She navigated to the garage camera feed. The Hyena S600 was still in spot B7, engine likely still running, the driver's silhouette unchanged. Jitai looked at the screen for a moment. Then he said something in Korean to Hyun-soo that produced a very specific kind of silence in the room. He doesn't know it failed, Jitai said. Not to anyone in particular. Then to Amara. The vehicle. Can you access the garage's ventilation controls from here? She looked at her screen. The sub-basement environmental controls are on the same legacy access system as the transit platform. I haven't tried to access them, but theoretically... Don't, Jitai said. Leave him. He'll wait until the contact time passes and then make his exit. When he does, I want a record of everything your cameras can give me. I can set up a continuous capture on the B7 feed. Do that. She did that. Her hands were steadier than she expected them to be. There was something about Jitai's particular quality of controlled focus that created a kind of professional gravity around him. The feeling that being in the same room with a person who was that precisely in command of themselves made the circumstances marginally less chaotic by proximity. She found herself leaning into that gravity like a building leaning into a prevailing wind. It was probably not the smartest response to the situation, but it was the honest one. Mr. Kang, she said without looking up from the screen. The person you're dealing with, Celeste Laurent, Marchetti Executive Advisory, she's not going to stop because this didn't work tonight. No, Jitai agreed. She won't. Seong-ho will know it failed by morning. By morning, Jitai said, I need to be somewhere that Seong-ho believes is exactly where I should be. He said something to Min-soo and Hyun-soo. Then he turned back to Amara. You said you spent a week not knowing what to do with this. Yes. What made you decide? She looked at him. I told you. I couldn't not. That's not an answer. She thought about it, really thought about it, in the 4 or 5 seconds that his question held the room, going back to the moment 2 nights ago when she'd been sitting in the audit office at 3 a.m. with the complete picture finally assembled on her screen. The transit requests, the Marchetti connections, the surveillance footage, and she'd understood, with a clarity that was almost physical, that she was the only person who had all of it. That without her, a man would drive to his death inside a vehicle his own brother had arranged, and the woman who had arranged it would slip back across an ocean and do it again to someone else. Because I've spent 3 years watching things happen in this hotel from behind glass, she said. Watching without intervening, because it's not my country and it's not my business, and I'm just the woman who checks the numbers at 4 a.m, and I got tired of watching things happen. Jitai held her gaze for a moment that she couldn't entirely categorize. Then he said, Can you get to the 3rd floor without using the main elevators? Yes. I need to see the private dining room, the one in the photograph. They went up through the maintenance levels, Amara leading, Jitai and Min-soo a half step behind her, Hyun-soo taking the rear. The corridors were empty. At 12:40 a.m. on a Tuesday, the hotel's non-guest areas were staffed only by a skeleton overnight crew, most of whom were concentrated in the kitchen prep areas and the front desk. And the silence of the upper maintenance passages was the specific silence of institutional spaces in the deep middle of the night. Absolute, slightly pressurized, carrying sounds from the guest floors like transmissions from a different atmosphere. Private Dining Room C was on the third floor's east wing, accessed from the main corridor through a set of frosted glass doors that the hotel used for small corporate events and confidential business dinners. From the maintenance side, there was an access door that led into a service alcove behind the room's north wall, originally designed for catering staff to stage courses before service. The alcove had a narrow window of reinforced glass that looked into the room's interior. Jitai stood at the window for a long moment, looking at the empty room. The table where the photograph had been taken was visible from this angle. Round 8 seats, a centerpiece of dried flowers that hadn't been changed in at least a week. The camera designation in the corner of the surveillance screenshot corresponded to a fixture mounted above the service entrance on the room's south wall. Amara had identified it 3 weeks ago, working backward from an unexplained system flag in the camera archive. 2 nights ago, she said, the dinner reservation was booked through the corporate alias I told you about. 4 guests. The reservation listed them as an international advisory team. Celeste Laurent was among them. She was the one I could identify. The other 3, I ran the images, but they don't appear in any accessible database. Jitai looked at the room a while longer. Then he turned to Min-Soo and spoke in Korean, and Min-Soo answered, and there was an exchange that Amara couldn't follow, but that had the particular cadence of men confirming a plan they'd partially discussed elsewhere. Hyun-Soo came up beside Amara. He was younger than she'd initially registered, mid-30s, with a face that defaulted to professional blankness, but had a particular sharpness behind it when he was actively processing something. You said you found the Marchetti connection 3 weeks ago, he said quietly. His English was good, heavily accented but grammatically precise. Did anyone at the hotel know you were looking? No, I work alone at night. The audit terminal logs are only reviewed during business hours, and the access points I was using are legacy systems that aren't on the active monitoring dashboard. Did you tell anyone outside the hotel? No. Hyun-Soo held her gaze for a moment. It wasn't a threatening look. It was the look of someone determining the answer to a problem that had multiple possible solutions. You understand that by being here, you are... He paused, searching for the right English. Inside this now. There is no version where you go back to the audit desk and none of this happened. I know that, Amara said. Do you? She looked at him steadily. I made that decision 2 hours ago when I printed the first page. I didn't make it by accident. Hyun-Soo studied her for another second. Then he gave a small nod. Not warm, not approving, but acknowledging, and stepped back. Jitai had finished his conversation with Min-Soo and turned toward her. I need to ask you something, Ms. Brooks, and I need an honest answer. All right. The surveillance footage from this room, the complete archive, not the screenshot you printed, where is it stored? On the hotel's internal camera archive server. Access protected, but the audit terminal has read permissions during overnight hours for billing verification purposes. Can it be copied? Amara thought about what that question meant. Not the technical question. She knew the answer to the technical question, but the question behind it. What Jitai was asking her to do. The line it would put her on the wrong side of legally, professionally, personally. The weight of what she already had in that manila envelope versus what he was asking for now. She thought about the man who had been waiting in the driver's seat of that car. Yes, she said, it can be copied. Jitai looked at her. Will you do it? She thought about the Marchetti files, the 3 dead executives in Europe, the ownership restructuring that had followed each of their deaths. Yes, she said. Jitai nodded. No gratitude in it. Not performance, not coldness. Just the acknowledged reality of a situation proceeding as it needed to proceed. He turned back to the window and looked at the empty dining room for one more moment. The room where his brother had calmly planned his death over a table with dried flowers and a woman from Geneva. The silence between them held. He used to be afraid of the dark, Jitai said. It wasn't directed at anyone. It was the particular vocalization of something that had nowhere else to go. When he first came to live with us, He was 7 years old and he was afraid of the dark, and I used to leave the hall light on outside his room all night because it was the only thing that helped." Amara said nothing. There was nothing to say to that. Jitai turned away from the window. "Let's go back down," he said. "I need to make a call." By 2:30 a.m., the picture had sharpened into something that had the terrible clarity of things you cannot unhear or unsee once you have heard and seen them. Amara had copied the surveillance archive from Private Dining Room C, 14 hours of footage spanning 3 days, which compressed into a 4.2 gigabyte file that she transferred onto an encrypted drive from the audit office's equipment cabinet. She had also copied the transit platform access logs in their entirety, the Marchetti invoice trail from the hotel's external booking records, and the credential access history from the night's events. She had done all of this in the audit office, alone, with a calmness that she recognized as the functional kind, the kind that lived on top of a much less calm thing and served as a working surface for it. Ji-tae had made his calls from the sub-basement, in Korean, in a voice so quiet she couldn't hear it from the corridor outside. Min-soo had gone somewhere to organize something she hadn't been briefed on. Hyun-soo had stationed himself in the maintenance corridor with a line of sight to both the garage camera feed on his phone and the service entrance to the parking level. When she came back to the sub-basement with the drive, Ji-tae was alone. He took the drive and turned it in his hands once, the way a person turns an object to confirm its physical reality, and then put it in his coat pocket. "Sung-ho will have a check-in protocol with the asset in the vehicle," he said. "Most likely a text confirmation between midnight and 2 a.m. When it doesn't come, he'll know. That gives you a window. It gives me the rest of tonight." He paused. "Ms. Brooks, when your shift ends, 6 a.m. When your shift ends, you should not go home." The way he said it was not a threat. It was the practical statement of someone giving her an accurate risk assessment, which was, in some ways, worse. "I understand," she said. "There is a safe house. On the south side of the river. Hyun-soo will arrange transport." Amara looked at him. "You're telling me I need to go into protective custody. I'm telling you that the people involved in this have demonstrated a willingness to eliminate complications." She thought about that, about her apartment in Mapogu with the window that faced the hill, the small routine of her life in a city that still felt slightly foreign even after 3 years, the audit desk where she had spent thousands of quiet hours building a picture of other people's hidden worlds. "What about my work?" she said, not as an objection, as a practical question. "I'll handle the hotel." He paused. "You have my word on that." Amar had spent 3 years learning to assess people in the deep middle of the night, when their defenses were thinner and their real natures more legible. She looked at Ji-tae in the fluorescent light of the sub-basement and understood that his word was the kind of currency that meant something specific, not because he was a good man in any uncomplicated sense, but because he was a man for whom the concept of debt had a structural reality that didn't admit exceptions. "All right," she said. Ji-tae nodded. Then, "One more question." "Yes." "The photograph, the one in the envelope. How long did you look at it before you decided to come down here tonight?" She thought about it. Honest answer. "A long time." "What did you see in it?" She knew what he was asking. Not about the photograph's evidentiary content, about what she had seen in Seong-ho's face. What had made her print it and carry it down 11 flights of stairs to a parking garage where she had stood for 11 minutes in the dark waiting for a man she didn't know. "I saw someone who had already decided," she said. There wasn't any doubt in his face, no hesitation. Whatever he felt about it, he had already gotten to the other side of it. She held Ji-tae's gaze. "That's when I knew it was real." Ji-tae was quiet. "And you?" he said. "Have you gotten to the other side of it?" The question sat in the space between them, in the industrial light, in the recycled air of the sub-basement. Amara thought about the parking garage, about stepping out of the shadow, about the 11 minutes of standing in the dark, and the moment she'd stopped calculating and started moving. "I'm working on it," she said. Outside, somewhere above them, the city was doing what cities did in the deep hours, breathing its altered midnight breath, moving its altered midnight traffic, holding its 10 million lives in the temporary suspension of a night that was already beginning, very slowly, to become the next morning. And somewhere above the maintenance corridors and the parking levels and the silent rooms of the Grand Seorak Hotel, In a penthouse suite with a view of the Han River that Amara had seen on the hotel's promotional materials, but never in person, a man named Kang Seung-ho was still waiting for a text confirmation that was never going to come. He was starting to understand that something had gone wrong. He just didn't know yet how completely or how close the person who had unraveled it was standing. By 3:47 a.m., Seung-ho knew. Amara watched it happen on the security feed, not in the penthouse, which had no interior cameras, but in the corridor outside it, where a single hall camera captured the moment Seung-ho emerged from his suite. In a bathrobe, and stood in the hallway with his phone pressed to his ear, very still, very white around the eyes, talking to someone with the tight, controlled urgency of a man who has just discovered that the scaffolding beneath everything he has built is gone. He ended the call. He stood in the hallway for a moment, alone. Then he went back inside. Ji-tae, seated beside her at the workbench in the sub-basement, watched the feed go still after the suite door closed. His face was unreadable. His breathing was slow and even and entirely controlled. "He'll run," Ji-tae said quietly. "Will he?" Amara asked. Ji-tae looked at the closed door on the screen. "No," he said. "He's not a runner. He'll calculate." A pause. "He'll decide that without confirmation of failure, he still has options. He'll come to me in the morning and play the role he's been playing. He'll smile at me over breakfast and ask about the meeting schedule and pretend that tonight never happened." He turned away from the screen. "And I," Ji-tae said, "will let him." Amara looked at him. "You're going to let him think you don't know," she said. "I'm going to let him think exactly what he needs to think," Ji-tae said, "right up until the moment when he can't anymore." In the corridor outside the suite on the security feed, the hallway was empty and still. And somewhere in that stillness, the thing between two brothers that had been building for longer than either of them could clearly see was moving, quietly and with terrible momentum, toward the only kind of ending that betrayals like this one ever actually had. The morning came the way mornings came in Seoul in early November. Gray at the edges first, then gray everywhere. A flat pewter light that pressed against the windows of the Grand Seorak Hotel without any particular warmth or promise. By 5 a.m., the kitchen staff were running the prep stations on the first floor, and the smell of stock and clean steel drifted up through the ventilation in a way that made the sub-basement feel slightly less like a place where consequential things were being decided. Amara had been awake for 22 hours. She knew this because she was the kind of person who tracked such things involuntarily, the way she tracked discrepancies in accounts, not obsessively, but with the background awareness of someone whose relationship with time had been shaped by years of work that existed in the margins of other people's days. She had eaten half a granola bar from her bag at some point between 1 and 2 a.m. and had stopped, not because she wasn't hungry, but because her stomach had sent up a clear message that it wasn't interested in processing anything right now. And she had respected that message. Ji-tae had not slept. She was certain of this without having watched him constantly. It was something in the quality of his wakefulness, the particular texture of alertness in a person who was running on something other than rest. Not caffeine, not adrenaline exactly, something older and more structural. The kind of wakefulness that came from a decision made so completely that the body didn't need to be told to stay alert. At 5:30 a.m., Hyun-soo came back to the sub-basement with 2 coffees and paper cups from the staff canteen and a look on his face that communicated several things in quick succession. That the man in the parking garage had finally left at 4:12 a.m., that his exit had been captured on Amara's continuous feed from 7 different angles, that Min-soo had identified him from the footage as a freelance operative with a known history in 3 countries, and that he was already gone from the building and likely the city. Ji-tae took one of the coffees, drank from it without tasting it, and said, "Go get the car, not the S600, the gray one." Hyun-soo left. Ji-tae looked at Amara across the workbench. She had the laptop open still, the corridor feed from the penthouse level running in a corner of the screen, quiet and unchanged for the past hour and 40 minutes. Seung-ho had not come out again. "You should sleep," Ji-tae said. "So should you." A pause. Something moved briefly across his face that might have been the ghost of a different kind of expression in a different kind of life. "In a few hours I need to have breakfast with my brother," he said. I need to look like a man who had an unremarkable night. Can you do that? He looked at her steadily. I've been doing it for 17 years, Ms. Brooks. She held his gaze. What does that mean? Jitai drank his coffee. He set the cup down with the precise care of a man who was using small physical actions to pace himself. It means that the man Seong-ho sees across the breakfast table every morning is not the man I am at 3 in the morning. It means I have been performing a version of myself for the people closest to me for longer than I can clearly remember. A pause. I imagine that sounds familiar to you. Amara thought about the audit desk, about the 3 years of watching from behind glass. Yeah, she said, it does. The difference, Jitai said, is that I chose that performance to protect something. I'm still not certain what Seong-ho was protecting by choosing his. She had no answer for that. Neither did he, clearly. It wasn't the kind of question that had one yet. At 5:55 a.m., 5 minutes before her shift technically ended, Amara logged out of the audit terminal for the last time, with the deliberate awareness of someone who understood that the action was a kind of threshold. She cleared her session, removed her access card from the reader, and stood for a moment in the audit office looking at the desk, the monitor, the stacked reference binders, the coffee ring on the right side of the blotter that had been there since October and that she had never gotten around to cleaning. She picked up her bag. She went back down to the sub-basement. She did not look back. The safe house was in Dongjak-gu, on the south side of the river, in a building that looked entirely like what it appeared to be from the outside. A mid-range residential block, 8 floors, the kind of place where people with regular jobs and regular lives came home at regular hours. The apartment on the 6th floor was clean, sparsely furnished, and smelled faintly of fresh paint over something older. Amara sat on the edge of the bed for approximately 4 minutes before she lay down on top of the covers in her work clothes and fell into the dense, seamless sleep of a body that had simply stopped negotiating. She woke at 1:17 p.m. to the sound of Hyun-soo knocking on the apartment door, and for approximately 3 seconds, she had the specific disorientation of waking in a place that wasn't hers, which had been her baseline experience for the first 6 months she lived in Seoul, and which she had not felt in well over a year. Then she remembered everything. It came back not in pieces, but all at once, the full weight of it, and she sat up and put her feet on the floor and said, 1 second. Hyun-soo came in with food, actual food from somewhere, a container of doenjang jigae and rice, and a plastic bag with something wrapped in foil that turned out to be a cheese sandwich, clearly purchased from 2 different establishments by someone who was trying to cover the bases of what a person from Atlanta might want to eat. She ate the rice and the soup and half the sandwich and didn't say anything about the logistical thoughtfulness of it, because she had a feeling Hyun-soo would find the acknowledgement awkward. The breakfast, she said, when she'd gotten enough food into her system to form sentences. How did it go? Hyun-soo sat in the apartment's single chair, straight-backed, hands on his knees, the posture of a man who treated sitting as a temporary operational state. They had breakfast, he said. 1 hour. Seong-ho arrived at the table at 8 a.m. He paused, searching, composed. They talked about business, the Incheon port matter, the Busan meetings next week. Another pause. He asked about the car. Amara looked up. He said he'd heard there was a maintenance alert on the S600. He asked if it had been resolved. Hyun-soo's expression was professionally neutral, but something behind it was not. Mr. Kang told him yes, that it was nothing. She absorbed that. The particular audacity of it, Seong-ho asking about the car he had arranged to be the instrument of his brother's death, over eggs and coffee, in a hotel where that brother had spent the night dismantling everything Seong-ho had built. And Jitai? He smiled, Hyun-soo said. He said it was nothing, and he changed the subject, and he smiled. Amara thought about what Jitai had said in the sub-basement, about performing a version of himself for the people closest to him, about 17 years. What happens now? She asked. Now, Hyun-soo said, Mr. Kang confirms. Bob. The confirmation process took the rest of the day, and Amara experienced it from the apartment in Dongjak-gu through Hyun-soo's periodic returns and a laptop that had been left for her, not her own, a clean machine with a secure connection, on which she helped build the evidentiary architecture that Jitai needed before he moved. This was, she discovered, what she was actually good at in this situation. Not the fieldwork. She had no illusions about that, and neither did anyone else. But the data, the threading of financial records and access logs and surveillance timestamps into a coherent structure that told a story any investigator could follow. This was what she had been doing at 4 a.m. for 3 years, pulling sense out of the numerical chaos of a large hotel's overnight accounts, and it transferred directly and completely to the work of making Jitai's case against his brother irrefutable. She found 3 more things in the afternoon that she hadn't had time to fully excavate the night before. The first was a series of wire transfers routed through 4 intermediate accounts across 3 jurisdictions that connected a numbered account in the Cayman Islands to a shell company registered in the British Virgin Islands whose sole listed director was a name she didn't recognize, but whose secondary authorization signatory was Kang Seong-ho. The second was an archived email thread recovered from a deleted folder in the hotel's corporate correspondence system, which she accessed through a permissions loophole she had discovered 8 months ago and never reported to IT because it had seemed irrelevant at the time, between the Marchetti Executive Advisory's administrative address and a personal email account that Seong-ho used for hotel bookings. The thread was 17 messages long and dated back 11 months. It was written in a mixture of English and Korean, with the studied blandness of a correspondence that had been deliberately constructed to appear innocuous, but whose subtext, read in context, was completely unambiguous. The third thing was the hardest. It was a single hotel room invoice, auto-filed in the Grand CRX Historical Billing Archive for a 2-night stay 14 months prior. The room had been booked under a corporate alias that Amara now recognized as one of Marchetti's recurring account names. The invoice was unremarkable, but attached to it, in the hotel's event management system, was a room service order. And cross-referenced against the hotel's service delivery logs for that date, Amara found the name of the room service attendant who had delivered the order. The attendant had been terminated 4 months ago for reasons listed in the HR system as conduct inconsistent with hotel standards. His personnel file included a disciplinary note dated 3 months after the Marchetti stay that referenced an unauthorized disclosure of guest information. Amara sat with that for a while. Then she followed the thread to where it went, through the HR system's outbound correspondence archive, to a severance agreement that included a non-disclosure clause, standard enough, and a signatory from the hotel's ownership group, Jitai's ownership group, which meant that someone in Jitai's corporate structure had known, 14 months ago, that the Marchetti account had generated a conduct issue significant enough to terminate an employee and pay for his silence. She stared at that finding for a long time. Then she typed it up, clearly and without interpretation, and added it to the document she was building, because her job was not to decide what it meant. Her job was to make sure the picture was complete. At 6:30 p.m., Hyun-soo came back and she showed him. He read the document twice, which was not something she'd seen him do with any previous item she'd produced, and then he took out his phone and made a call and spoke in Korean for 4 minutes. When he hung up, he said, "Mr. Kang wants to see you." They met in the back room of a restaurant in Yongsan that Jitai apparently owned through a holding company, a private room with a round table and no windows and a door that locked from the inside. Jitai was already there when Amara arrived, seated with a glass of water in front of him and a man she hadn't seen before. 50s, heavy-set, with the deliberate stillness of someone who was accustomed to being the most dangerous person in most rooms, seated across from him. The unfamiliar man left when Amara came in. Jitai didn't introduce him. Jitai looked different than he had in the sub-basement. He had changed into fresh clothes, dark suit, no tie, the controlled understatement of someone who understood that real power didn't need to announce itself. And he'd had some amount of rest, she could tell, even if it had been brief. But he also looked older than he had at midnight. Not tired, just older, in the way that certain days aged people at a different rate than their chronological progression would suggest. He looked at the document she put on the table without touching it first. "You found the row file," he said. She blinked. "The terminated room service employee. His name was Ro Jae-won." Jitai's voice was even. "I authorized the settlement agreement 14 months ago." Amara said nothing. "I was told," Jitai said, "that he had violated a guest's privacy by sharing room information with a third party. I was told the guest had requested formal resolution. I signed the document and moved on." He paused. "I didn't look at which account the guest was registered under." "Marchetti." Amar said. Marchetti. He picked up the water glass, held it without drinking. Someone in my administrative structure filtered the notification, changed the account name in the version of the report I received. He set the glass down. I've spent the last 4 hours determining who. And? Jitai looked at the table. There's a woman named Seo Mirai. She's been the senior administrator for my corporate hospitality division for 9 years. She processes the hotel booking accounts. He paused. Her daughter began a master's program in Paris 14 months ago. Full scholarship from a private educational foundation I have never heard of. The shape of it settled into the room. Celeste Laurent's network, Amar said. Her educational foundation is one of 4 philanthropic entities registered under Marchetti's parent holding group in Geneva. Jitai's voice was still even, completely controlled. The control itself was the most unnerving thing about it, because she understood now that it was not the absence of rage, but its total compression. Seomire's daughter didn't know. She applied to the program in good faith. She's 23 years old. And Seomire? She has been providing access to my corporate correspondence and administrative systems for at least 14 months, in exchange for her daughter's continued funding. He looked at Amara. She didn't know what they were using the access for. She told herself it was corporate intelligence, competitive information. She told herself no one was getting hurt. The silence in the room had a specific weight. Where is she now? Amara asked. In my office building in Gangnam, under informal observation. Jitai's eyes were steady. I haven't spoken to her. I won't, yet. If she knows she's been found, she'll contact Laurent's network and the entire operation will relocate. Amara processed that. So right now Laurent doesn't know how much you know. She knows the car failed. She knows someone intervened. A pause. She doesn't know you exist. She doesn't know about the surveillance archive or the financial records. What about Seong-ho? Seong-ho knows the car failed. He doesn't know why or how or by whom. Jitai looked at the document again. He spent the afternoon in his suite. He made 4 calls. My people have the metadata, not the content. One of those calls was to a Geneva country code. Laurent. They're recalibrating, Amara said. They're deciding whether to escalate or extract. Jitai's jaw tightened fractionally. Laurent will push for escalation. She's built her entire operation on the principle that hesitation is how operations unravel. If she extracts now, she loses the investment she's made in positioning Seong-ho. She'll want a second attempt. Amara felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the room temperature. When? That depends on how quickly she can arrange it and how confident she is that the first failure was contained. Jitai looked at her directly, which is why I need to move first, and why I need everything you've built to be bulletproof before I do. She looked at the document, thought about what was in it and what wasn't yet, and what would need to be verified. There are 3 financial threads I haven't fully traced, she said. The Cayman account has 2 more downstream transfers I couldn't follow with the access I had today. And the Marchetti corporate structure has a subsidiary in Luxembourg that I think connects to the Seoul operation, but I have people who can get you that access tonight. Jitai said it without hesitation, which meant he had already anticipated it, which meant he had been planning this conversation before she walked in. Amara looked at him. You had this meeting planned before Hyun-soo called me, she said. Not an accusation, a statement of what she'd noticed. Jitai held her gaze. I had the shape of it planned. The specific contents depended on what you found today. And if I hadn't found the row file, then I would have had one less piece of the picture. You knew about Roh Jae-won. I knew a terminated employee had been part of the Marchetti visit. My people found that this morning. He paused. I didn't know about Seo Mirai's connection until you traced the authorization chain. That was yours. She absorbed that. It was a careful accounting, precise about what credit belonged where, which was not what she'd have expected and which told her something. The Luxembourg subsidiary, she said. If I can trace that connection, what does it give you? It gives me the financial spine of Celeste Laurent's entire Korean operation. Every transaction, every facilitation payment, every account that's been used to move money through this network. He leaned forward slightly. It gives me something I can hand to federal investigators that is so complete, so cross-referenced, that there is no version of a prosecution that doesn't end in conviction. Amara sat with that. "You're building a case," she said, "not just protecting yourself." "I'm doing both," Jitai said. "One doesn't preclude the other." She thought about the 3 dead European executives, the ownership restructuring that had followed, the clean, invisible machinery of it, the way Laurent had built something that killed people and then evaporated before anyone could name it. "All right," she said. "Get me the access. I'll finish the trace tonight." Jitai nodded. He started to reach for his phone, then stopped. "Miss Brooks." His voice shifted, not softer, but differently weighted. "The Rojewan settlement. The fact that my signature was on that document." He met her eyes. "You included it in the file?" "Yes." "Without editorializing it?" "That's not my job." She held his gaze. "My job is to make sure the picture is complete. What you do with the complete picture is yours." Jitai looked at her for a moment with the measuring quality she'd first seen in the parking garage. Then he picked up his phone and made the call. The access came through at 9 p.m., a set of credentials to a secure financial intelligence platform that Amara was professionally certain she was not supposed to be touching, operated by an organization whose logo she recognized from compliance certification programs, and whose database represented the kind of information that took court orders or very well-placed relationships to reach. She didn't ask which of those Jitai had used. She opened the platform and went to work. The Luxembourg subsidiary took her 2 hours to fully unthread. It was structured with genuine sophistication. 3 holding layers, 2 nominee directors, a share structure that had been reorganized twice in the past 18 months in a way that was clearly designed to complicate any backward tracing. But whoever had built it had made one assumption that they'd built the entire architecture on, that anyone trying to trace it would be working forward from the public records, not backward from the transaction metadata embedded in the financial platform's internal audit trail. Amara worked backward. It was the direction she'd been trained in. Start from the discrepancy, work toward the source. Find the number that doesn't match, and pull that thread until something larger comes loose. At 11:12 p.m., something larger came loose. The Luxembourg subsidiary, registered as a management consultancy, dormant in terms of public activity, had a single active function. It was the clearing entity for a series of monthly payments totaling just under 800,000 euros, distributed across 19 recipient accounts in 7 countries. 18 of those accounts connected, through various intermediary layers, to operational costs she could identify: shell companies, logistics accounts, the Geneva Foundation that funded Seomire's daughter's scholarship. The 19th account was different. It was a personal account, registered at a private bank in Zurich. The name on it was not Celeste Laurent, or any variation thereof, and it was not any of the corporate aliases Amara had catalogued over the past 24 hours. It was a name she recognized. She had seen it that morning in the hotel's VIP guest registry, a name that appeared in Jitai's penthouse suite's additional authorized visitor list under the category of corporate associate standing access. She stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up the secure phone Hyunsu had left her and called the number Jitai had given her. He picked up on the second ring. "I found the 19th account," she said. "Tell me." She told him. The silence on the other end of the line lasted 7 full seconds. She counted them without meaning to, the way she counted everything. When Jitai spoke again, his voice was exactly the same as it had been before she'd spoken the name. Controlled, even, precise. But underneath it, in the quality of the pause that followed, in the specific texture of the silence before he said what he said next, Amara heard something that she recognized because she had been listening to people in the deep hours of the night for 3 years, and she knew the sound that a person made when the last thing they still believed in was taken away from them. "Where are you?" Jitai said. "The apartment." "Stay there." A pause. "Don't contact anyone. Don't use your personal phone." "What are you going to do?" The silence lasted 3 seconds this time. "Tonight," Jitai said, "I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to go to my penthouse, and I'm going to pour a drink, and I'm going to sit at the window, and I'm going to look at the river." Another pause. "Tomorrow evening," he said, "I'm going to tell Seong-ho that I'm taking my nightly drive across the Han River Bridge, and I'm going to make sure that the right people know exactly which route I'm taking. Amara understood what that meant. The full shape of it came together in the space of a single breath. The plan, the risk, the thing Jitai was proposing to use himself as. "You're going to let them try again," she said. "I'm going to give them the opportunity," Jitai said, "to believe they have won." The phone was quiet. "And then?" she said. "And then," Jitai said, "there will be no more performances." The line stayed open for a moment, not dead, but holding, the way a breath holds before it releases. And then he was gone, and Amara was left in the apartment in Dongjaku, with the financial platform still open on the laptop screen and the name of the 19th account still glowing there in the dark, and the sound of the city outside the window, and the understanding that tomorrow night, one way or another, everything was going to become irreversible. Jitai did not sleep that night either. Amara knew this not because she was watching him. She wasn't. She was 6 kilometers away in the Dongjaku apartment, staring at a financial platform on a laptop screen until her eyes felt like they'd been sandpapered. But because at 2:47 a.m. a message came through the secure phone from Hyun-soo that said only, "He's still at the window," which told her everything she needed to know about the state of a man who had just learned that the 19th account belonged to someone he had trusted absolutely, and who was now sitting at the glass looking at the river that his brother intended to use as the backdrop for his murder. She didn't sleep either. She went back to the Luxembourg subsidiary files and built the complete trace of the 19th account's transaction history going back 22 months, because that was the only thing she could do that felt like it was not simply waiting for tomorrow night to arrive. By 4 a.m., she had a 31-page document. By 5 a.m., she understood that it was not 31 pages of evidence against Celeste Laurent. It was 31 pages of evidence against 2 people. And the second one, the name on the Zurich account, the name from Jitai's VIP authorized visitor list, had a history with the Black Phoenix Syndicate that went back not 22 months but 11 years, which meant that what Amara was looking at was not an infiltration. It was a foundation, something that had been built into the structure of Jitai's organization so long ago and so carefully that it had become load-bearing without anyone noticing. She sat with that until the gray November light came back through the apartment window and the city started making its morning sounds. Then she called Hyun-soo. The man's name was Oh Sung-jin. He was 54 years old, a senior director of the Black Phoenix Syndicate's legitimate corporate arm, a man who had sat across from Jitai at executive meetings for 11 years, and who had, according to the transaction history Amara had spent the night building, been routing a percentage of the syndicate's legitimate revenue streams through the Luxembourg subsidiary for the entire duration of his tenure. Not a large percentage, never enough to trigger the kind of variance that a careful audit would flag as anomalous. 4 to 7%, depending on the quarter. Calibrated, patient, precisely below the threshold of visibility. Amara explained this to Jitai in the back room of the Yongsan restaurant at 8 a.m., with the 31-page document on the table between them and Hyun-soo standing at the door and Min-soo seated in the corner with an expression on his face like a man who had bitten into something and could not decide whether to swallow it. Jitai listened without interrupting. He had the physical stillness of someone who had made peace sometime in the night with the possibility that things were worse than he'd believed, and who was now simply receiving confirmation of that assessment. His face was composed. His hands were flat on the table. He had a coffee in front of him that he hadn't touched. When Amara finished, the room was quiet for a moment. 11 years, Jitai said. The earliest transaction I can confirm is dated 22 months ago, but the account structure suggests it was operational before that. The architecture of the subsidiary is too mature for 22 months. The layering, the reorganizations. My estimate is 11 years based on the pattern of the corporate restructuring events that correspond to Oh Sung-jin's promotion history within your organization. Jitai looked at the document. He came to me, he said. Not to Amara, not quite to anyone. When my father died, Sung-jin was the first person at the door. He sat with me for 3 hours. A pause. He helped me write the speech I gave at the transition assembly. Nobody said anything. He's the one who recommended Seung-ho's promotion to deputy director, Jitai said, 4 years ago. He told me Seung-ho was ready, that the organization needed continuity, that bringing family into the core structure would consolidate loyalty. He paused again. The pauses had a specific quality, not hesitation, but the sound of a man watching a very long sequence of events reassemble itself in a different order. I thought it was loyalty, to me, to the organization. He was positioning Seong-ho, Amar said, carefully, placing him where he'd be most useful when the time came. A deputy director who orchestrates the death of his older brother inherits an organization that is already compromised from the inside. Jitai's voice was completely flat. The transition would be seamless. Laurent gets control of the Korean operation through Seong-ho. Sung-jin gets his percentage increased, and the Black Phoenix Syndicate becomes another corporate vehicle for the Marchetti Network's expansion into East Asian markets. He picked up the coffee, held it, put it back down. Sung-ho doesn't know about Sung-jin, Amara said. Jitai looked at her. The transaction structure keeps them separated, she said. Sung-jin's payments route through a different branch of the Luxembourg subsidiary than the operational accounts connected to Seong-ho's planning. They're compartmentalized. She paused. Seong-ho thinks Laurent is his contact. He thinks he initiated this. He thinks he found her. She found him, Jitai said, through Sung-jin. Sung-jin gave Laurent the access and the intelligence to identify Seong-ho as the lever. He gave her 11 years of organizational intelligence, your schedule, your vulnerabilities, your relationships. She paused. He gave her you. The room absorbed that. Jitai stood. He walked to the wall and stood facing it, which was not a dramatic gesture. It was simply the movement of a man who needed to be looking at something that wasn't asking anything of him for a moment. His shoulders were level. His back was controlled. But she could see the tension in it. Not the physical tension of a body preparing for action, but the deeper tension of a mind that was dismantling and rebuilding simultaneously. The plan doesn't change, he said to the wall. Mr. Kong, the plan doesn't change. He turned around. His face was the same as it had been. The control had not slipped, not even fractionally, which was the most frightening thing she had seen in 2 days, and she had seen several frightening things. Tonight I tell Seong-ho I'm taking the Han River Drive. The operation proceeds as planned. Sung-jin will know, Amara said. If you move against Laurent and Seong-ho tonight without accounting for Sung-jin, I know what happens. Jitai's voice came out with a sharpness that hadn't been in it before. Not anger at her, she understood that clearly, but anger finding the only available surface. He pulled it back immediately, a visible act of control. I know. Sung-jin will know something went wrong before we can reach him. He'll run. Or he'll warn Laurent. If she knows the operation is compromised, she'll kill Seong-ho to eliminate the exposure and extract. Jitai finished the sentence with the calm precision of someone who had spent the hours between midnight and 8 a.m. thinking through every possible sequence. She'll have someone inside Seong-ho's network, an insurance contact, someone he trusts who reports back to her. The room was very quiet. You already know who it is, Amara said. Jitai looked at her for a moment, then he sat back down. There's a woman, he said, Kim Da-yoon. She's been Seong-ho's personal assistant for 2 years. She was placed with him through a staffing agency that Marchetti's HR subsidiary, Amara said. She pulled up the document on her laptop, found the page, turned it toward him. Jitai looked at the page. A muscle moved in his jaw. She reports to Laurent, he said, not to Seong-ho. The staffing agency has made 9 payments to an account connected to Marchetti's Korean operations over the past 22 months. I found it last night in the Luxembourg trace. She paused. She's been inside his operation from the beginning. Laurent has eyes on Seong-ho that Seong-ho doesn't know about. Yunsu made a sound from the doorway. Not a word. Just a sound that communicated the specific frustration of a professional who has discovered that the problem he thought he understood is significantly larger than advertised. So Laurent knows everything Seong-ho does, Jitai said. Every decision he makes, every contact he has, every... He stopped. His eyes moved to a point somewhere past Amara's left shoulder. The check-in protocol. Last night, when the car failed, Seong-ho stood in the hallway and made 4 calls. One was a Geneva country code, Amara said. You told me. The others were domestic. I assumed they were internal contacts. Kim Da-yoon. Jitai looked at her. If one of those domestic calls went to Kim Da-eun, Amara said, then Laurent knew within hours of the car failing that Seung-ho had lost contact with the asset. She knew the operation was compromised. She paused. She's been running a parallel assessment this whole time. She doesn't need Seung-ho to tell her what happened because Da-eun is already watching him. The implications of that settled into the room one by one, each one landing with the weight of a door closing on a possible exit. She knows more than we thought, Amara said. What does she know? She knows the car failed and that Seung-ho didn't cause the failure. She knows there was an intervention she didn't account for. Amara paused. She doesn't know the source yet, but she's looking. How long before she finds you? The question was direct and specific, and Amara had been not thinking about it since 3 a.m. with the determined focus of someone who understood that not thinking about a thing was its own form of preparation. She made herself think about it now. The hotel's audit system access logs show my session activity from last night, she said. If someone with the right access to the hotel's IT infrastructure does a targeted review of overnight activity for that period, they can see that the audit terminal was used to access systems outside the standard audit function. She paused. The transit platform access, the camera archive, the HR system. Can it be cleaned? I didn't clean it last night because I didn't have time. If I go back in now, can it be cleaned now? She thought about it, honestly. The session logs are time-stamped and backed up to an off-site server at 6 a.m. daily. Last night's activity backed up at 6:02 a.m. The backup is outside the hotel's internal system. The room absorbed that. So it exists, Jitai said. Permanently. Yes. He nodded once, not in response to her, in response to something internal, an accounting of the situation's shape. Then it's a question of whether Laurent's people find it before tonight. Her network would need specific access to the hotel's IT infrastructure to conduct that kind of review. That's not a standard capability. Seo Mirae? Hyun-soo said from the doorway. Amara stopped. Of course. Seo Mi-rai, the corporate hospitality administrator with 9 years of access to Jitai's organizational systems, whose daughter's scholarship had bought 14 months of quiet cooperation, who was currently under informal observation in Jitai's Gangnam office building, unaware that she'd been found, who had access to the hotel's corporate IT infrastructure through her administrative role. If Laurent contacts Seo Mi-rai directly and asks her to pull the audit logs, Amara started. She'll do it, Jitai said. She's been doing what they ask for 14 months. She won't stop now. He looked at Hyun-soo. How long before Laurent makes that contact? If Da-eun reported the failed check-in last night, Hyun-soo said, Laurent has had 12 hours to assess. If she's identified the hotel as the point of intervention, she may already have contacted Seo Mi-rai. Then she may already have the audit logs. Yes. The word landed in the room and didn't leave. Amara felt the temperature of the situation change, not dramatically, not with any visible physical effect, but in the way that she understood the ground beneath the plan had shifted. The operational window they'd been working with, the assumption that Laurent's knowledge was limited, had a different shape than it had had an hour ago. She knows I was in the system, Amara said. The words felt strange coming out. The acknowledgement of her own exposure stated plainly. In a room with men for whom exposure had consequences she understood theoretically, but not viscerally. She may not know it was me specifically, but she knows someone inside the hotel accessed those systems. A hotel employee, Jitai said, working overnight. The night auditor, Hyun-soo said. The three of them sat with the logical chain of that. A hotel that Jitai's organization had a connection to. An unexplained access event on the night the car failed. An overnight employee with access to the exact systems someone had used. How many people were working in the hotel last night during that window? Jitai asked. On the overnight shift? Across all departments? 14. The audit desk is a single-person position. Jitai looked at her. She'll find your name, he said. Yes, Amar said. She will. The room was silent. Then Jitai said, How much time do we have? Hyun-soo pulled out his phone, checked something, put it back in his pocket. Seo Mi-rai hasn't left the Gangnam building. No outbound calls from her desk phone since 7 a.m. If she received a contact from Laurent's network, check her personal mobile. Hyun-soo made a call, brief, in Korean. He listened. His face did something that Amara had not seen it do in 2 days. She made a call at 7:43 a.m., Hyun-soo said, from her personal phone, to a number that routes through a Swiss carrier. 7:43 a.m. 40 minutes ago. 40 minutes was not very long. It was also, depending on what Seo Mirai had said and how quickly Laurent's people could work, potentially enough. They have my name, Amara said, not as a question. They have a name, Jitai said. They'll need to verify it. Run it, find your background, your address, determine your current location. How long does that take? Jitai looked at Hyun-soo. For Laurent's network, Hyun-soo said, 2 hours, maybe 3. Amara did the arithmetic without wanting to. It was 8:17 a.m. 2 hours put them at 10:15. 3 at 11:15. Jitai's plan required tonight. The Han River Drive, the setup, the operational response that Jitai had spent the night preparing with the Black Phoenix resources that Hyun-soo had been quietly mobilizing. That was 10 hours away, at minimum. They did not have 10 hours of clean space. The apartment, she said, Dongjak-gu. If they have my name and they're running a location trace, you're not going back there, Jitai said. It came out with a speed that suggested he'd already made this decision before she'd said the words. Then where? Jitai looked at her with the expression she'd come to understand as his operational face. Not cold, not warm, but focused in a way that organized everything in the room around the axis of the immediate problem. There's a second location. My people use it for sensitive transfers. It's off any network that Seo Mirai would know about. That doesn't help us with the timeline, Amara said. Even if I'm safe, if Laurent knows my name, she knows someone pulled those audit logs. She knows the failed car wasn't random. She knows there's an intelligence source inside the hotel that fed information to... She stopped. Jitai was already nodding. She knows I know, he said. She'll move the timeline. She'll move it forward, he said. She won't wait for tonight. If she believes I have complete intelligence on the operation, the safe play for her is to extract Seong-ho and burn the entire Seoul structure before I can lock it down. He paused. Which means she'll contact Da-eun. Tell her to move Seong-ho out of the hotel. If Seong-ho leaves the hotel, he disappears into Laurent's network and I never get another clean position on either of them. Jitai stood again, but this time it was not the movement of a man seeking a neutral surface. It was the movement of a man who had reached the end of the assessment phase and arrived at the action phase, and whose body was adjusting accordingly. Hyun-soo. Yes. What's Seong-ho's current location? Hyun-soo checked his phone. Penthouse. The floor camera shows him entering the elevator to the lobby level 11 minutes ago. He went to the hotel restaurant. He's eating. And Da-eun? A pause. She's not in her room. The room shifted. Her room key was last used at 7:51 a.m., Hyun-soo said, reading from his phone. She checked out of her room at the Hotel Business Center at 8:03 a.m. 8:03 a.m., 14 minutes ago. 8 minutes after Seo Mirai's call to the Swiss carrier. She's already moving, Amar said. She'll go to Seong-ho in the restaurant, Jitai said. Tell him there's a complication. Tell him they need to relocate. We have maybe 20 minutes before she reaches him, Hyun-soo said. 20 minutes. The number sat in the room like a lit fuse. Jitai turned to Amara. His face was the same. His hands were the same. But something in the space around him had contracted to the specific density of a decision being made that could not be unmade. The surveillance archive, he said. The complete copy. The financial documents. Everything you built last night. Where is it? The encrypted drive is in the apartment. The document files are on the clean laptop. Hyun-soo is going to get the drive. The laptop comes with you. He paused. Ms. Brooks, I need you to do something that is outside what I have any right to ask of you. She looked at him. I need you to go back into the hotel. The sentence landed with a weight that she felt physically, a pressure in the chest that was distinct from fear and adjacent to it. If I go back to the hotel, I know what it means, Jitai said. I know what I'm asking. Laurent's people are running your name. Within 2 hours, they'll have your location. If you're inside the hotel, inside the systems, you're visible. You're a target. Then why? Because the hotel's camera system can track Da-Eun's movement from the moment she entered the building. Because if you pull her footage from the past 48 hours and find her contact points, the locations where she communicated with Laurent, the timing of those communications against Seong-ho's movements, we have a complete operational map of Laurent's Korean network. He paused. And because you're the only person who can pull that footage in the time we have. Amara looked at him. She thought about the audit desk, about the 3 years of watching from behind glass, about the moment in the parking garage when she had stepped out of the shadow and stopped calculating. She thought about the name on the 19th account. She thought about Dae-Yoon in a hotel restaurant, moving toward a man who thought she was loyal to him, carrying instructions from a woman in Geneva who had decided that the entire Seoul operation was now a problem to be burned clean. If Da-Eun gets to Seong-ho before I get to the system, she said. Then we lose the window entirely, Ji-tae said. Seong-ho disappears. Laurent disappears. Sung-jin has enough warning to extract his assets and burn his connection to the Luxembourg subsidiary. His voice was even, completely even. And this happens again to someone else. Different city. Different name, different car. The room was silent. Amara picked up the laptop. I need a staff entrance that's not on Marchetti's radar, she said. Ji-tae looked at Hyun-soo. The loading dock on the B3 level, Hyun-soo said. Service elevator takes you directly to the administrative floor. I'll need a valid badge access credential for that entrance. Min-soo's credential, Ji-tae said. Min-soo looked up from the corner, nodded once, and reached into his jacket. Amara took the badge. She looked at it for a moment. The photograph of a man with a permanently damaged left ear, the laminated surface of it, the small weight of it in her hand. 20 minutes, she said. Less now, Ji-tae said. She stood, picked up her bag, moved to the door, then stopped. The 19th account, she said without turning around. Oh, Sung-jin, he's going to find out today that the operation failed and that you know about the Luxembourg subsidiary. What does he do? The question hung in the room. Ji-tae's voice, when it came, was very quiet. He's going to do exactly what a man who has spent 11 years preparing for this moment does when that moment arrives ahead of schedule, he said. He's going to pick up a phone and make a call that protects himself at the expense of everyone around him. And if that call goes to someone inside your security structure, then some of the men who are supposed to be protecting me tonight, Ji-tae said, will be working against me. Amara stood in the doorway with her bag over her shoulder and the cold weight of that sentence settling into the space between her shoulder blades like a hand pressing her toward a door she could still, technically, not open. She opened it anyway. The morning was gray and cold outside, the kind of Seoul November morning that felt like the city was conserving itself against what was coming, and she walked toward it with the clean laptop under her arm and Min-soo's badge in her pocket, and the understanding, arriving now with a clarity she had been building toward since she stepped out of that shadow in the parking garage 2 nights ago, that she had passed the last point where any of this was reversible at least 12 hours. The loading dock on B3 smelled like cold concrete and diesel exhaust, and the particular staleness of a space that existed entirely in service of other spaces, functional, invisible, unmemorable. Amara badged through with Min-soo's credential at 8:34 a.m., and the door opened without hesitation, which was either a good sign or the last good sign she was going to get for a while, and she moved through it without stopping to decide which. The service elevator took 40 seconds to arrive and another 30 to reach the administrative floor. She counted them. Counting was the thing her mind defaulted to when it needed something to do that wasn't screaming, and right now counting was exactly what she needed. The administrative corridor was empty at this hour. The hotel's day staff didn't fully populate until 9, and the overnight crew had cleared out at 6. She moved down the corridor with her bag over one shoulder and the laptop under her arm, and Min-soo's badge clipped to her lanyard where it might pass a casual glance as her own. Her footsteps on the tile were too loud in the empty hallway. She shortened her stride without thinking about it, an instinct toward quietness that she hadn't known she had until it presented itself. The audit office was unlocked. It was always unlocked during transition hours. A security gap she had flagged in her first year and been told was a low-priority item. She pushed through the door, set the laptop on the desk next to the terminal, and sat down. Her hands were shaking slightly. She noticed this with the same clinical detachment she'd been applying to everything since she'd walked out of the Yongsan restaurant, as a data point, not as an emotional event. She pressed them flat on the desk for 3 seconds, and the shaking stopped. She logged into the audit terminal using her own credentials, which was either brave or stupid and was probably both, and navigated to the camera archive. Dayan's room was 1407. She pulled the 14th floor corridor feed first, going back 48 hours, running it at 4 times speed, watching the empty hallway flicker past until Da-Yun appeared and disappeared in the jerky acceleration of the fast forward. She found 6 exits and returns over the 2-day period. She noted the timestamps, cross-referenced them against the hotel's access log to identify which areas Da-Yun had badged into during each absence, and built a movement map in 11 minutes. 3 of the 6 absences corresponded to standard guest activity: restaurant, spa, lobby. The other 3 were different. 2 of them involved the hotel's business center, which had private phone booths along the east wall that were technically soundproofed and practically invisible to the main room camera. The third was a 15-minute period yesterday afternoon during which Da-Eun had badged into a meeting room on the 2nd floor that had been booked under a corporate alias Amara now recognized immediately: Marchetti Executive Advisory. Her stomach dropped, and she let it drop and kept working. She pulled the business center feed for Da-Yun's 2 visits. The booths were in the camera's peripheral range. She could see the exterior of the booth, Da-Eun entering it, the frosted glass showing the shape of her using the booth's landline. She could not hear the calls. She did not need to hear them. The timestamps were enough. They corresponded, within a margin of 8 to 14 minutes, to the timestamps on Seong-ho's security movements that she had cataloged the night before. Da-Yun made a call. Seong-ho changed his schedule. Da-Yun wasn't just reporting to Laurent. She was actively managing Seong-ho's exposure, steering him away from situations where Jitai's security team might observe anomalous behavior, keeping him calibrated to the operations timeline. Amara copied everything to the clean laptop and pulled up the 2nd floor meeting room feed. The footage from yesterday afternoon showed Da-Yun entering meeting room 204 at 2:17 p.m., sitting at the table and waiting. At 2:23 p.m., a second person entered the room. Amara had the feed at normal speed so she could read the details properly, and she watched the second person cross to the table and sit down and turn toward the camera angle at a moment when the room's lighting caught the face clearly. She stopped the footage. She looked at the face on the screen. It was not Celeste Laurent. Amara had pulled Laurent's corporate photographs from the Marchetti website 3 weeks ago when she'd first started building the file, and she knew Laurent's face, mid-50s, angular, the particular composed authority of a woman who had spent decades in rooms where she was the most dangerous person present. The woman on the screen was younger, 30s, dark hair, forgettable features, the kind of face that was professionally designed to be forgotten. But she was wearing a hotel staff lanyard. Amara zoomed the image, enhanced the lanyard card as far as the resolution would allow. The name was partially obscured, but the department designation was legible: Corporate Security. Amara sat very still. The hotel's corporate security department reported directly to the ownership group's administrative structure, which meant it reported to Jitai's corporate arm, which meant Oh Sung-jin, whose portfolio included oversight of the corporate hospitality division that interfaced with the hotel, had access to the corporate security personnel roster. She picked up the secure phone with hands that were not shaking this time. They were past shaking now. They were in the territory on the other side of that, which was a cold, deliberate stillness that she recognized as the version of herself that appeared in the deep hours of the night when something in the numbers was genuinely, seriously wrong. She called Hyun-soo. He picked up on the first ring. "There's a mole in the hotel's corporate security department," she said. Female, 30s, dark hair. She met with Da-Eun in meeting room 204 yesterday at 2:17 p.m. for 9 minutes. "I need a name. Send me the screenshot." She sent it. 14 seconds of silence. "Her name is Park Yoon-ji," Hyun-soo said. "She's been with corporate security for 3 years. She's Laurent's, which means she's Sung-jin's placement." Amara paused. "Hyun-soo, she has access to the hotel's full security infrastructure. If she's been activated, she can lock down the building. She can do more than that. She can control the camera feeds. She can disable the access log in real time. She can direct the hotel's security personnel to any location in the building without triggering a management override. Amara paused. She can tell them I'm here. Silence on the line. Then, get out of the audit office. I need another 4 minutes. Amara. His use of her first name was its own kind of alert. He hadn't used it before. Get out now. 4 minutes. Then I'm out. She heard him exhale. Not approval. The sound of a man deciding not to waste time arguing with something that was already happening. I'm sending someone to the administrative floor, he said. Service elevator. He'll be there in 6 minutes. I'll be in the corridor. She hung up and went back to the terminal and worked faster. The Dayan movement map was complete. She had timestamps, locations, communication patterns, the meeting room footage, the business center booth visits, the access log cross-reference. She had the Park Yoon-ji identification. She had a 90-minute window yesterday afternoon during which Da-yoon, Park Yoon-ji, and a third individual she hadn't yet identified had all been in the building simultaneously, which, given everything she now knew about the operational structure, almost certainly represented a live briefing. Laurent's people confirming the timeline for the second attempt before the first one had even been resolved. They'd been planning a second attempt before the first one happened, which meant the first attempt was never the primary operation. It was a test, a calibration, a way of measuring Jitai's response protocol and identifying the gaps. She pulled the third individual's footage, took 90 seconds to trace the badge access back to a name. Oh Sung-jin. He had been in the building yesterday afternoon. He had badged through the service entrance on B2 at 1:58 p.m. and badged out at 3:34 p.m. He was in the building at the same time as Da-eun and Park Yoon-ji. He had been in the building this whole time. Not just theoretically, not just as a name on a transaction record, physically. Moving through the same corridors, Amara copied the final files, closed the terminal session, and picked up the laptop. She was out of the audit office and moving down the corridor in the time it took her to process the full implication of that, which was approximately 15 seconds. The corridor was still empty. She moved toward the service elevator. Her phone buzzed. A text from Hyun-soo. Don't use the elevator. Stairs, B3, now. She changed direction without breaking stride. The stairwell door was 20 feet ahead on her left. She pushed through it and started down. She heard the elevator doors open behind her as the stairwell door closed. The man Hyun-soo had sent was waiting at the B3 level in a gray delivery van that was idling against the loading dock wall. He was young, early 30s, with the compact build and deliberate economy of movement of someone who had been trained to do exactly what was needed and nothing that wasn't. He didn't introduce himself. He opened the van's side door, she got in, and they were moving before she'd fully closed it. She called Hyun-soo from the moving van. Da-yoon, she said. Where is she? She reached Seong-ho in the restaurant at 8:41 a.m. They're still inside. 8:41 was 7 minutes ago. What are they doing? Talking. Our observer has line of sight, but not audio. Seong-ho hasn't moved? Not yet. Amara looked at the laptop screen, at the footage of Da-yoon and Park Yoon-ji in the meeting room, at the timestamp of Oh Sung-jin's building access yesterday afternoon. Hyun-soo, the second attempt. It's not tonight. It was never tonight. Giving Jitai the Han River route was the bait. They want him to run the route. They've been planning for that specific scenario. A pause. Explain. Da-eun steered Seong-ho toward the Han River Drive as the contingency. Look at the timeline. She made a business center call at 4:15 p.m. yesterday, 40 minutes after the Sung-jin meeting. Seong-ho proposed the Han River route to Laurent 2 hours after that. That's not Seong-ho generating a plan. That's Da-eun feeding him the plan that Laurent and Sung-jin already built. Silence on the line. Then, very carefully, they let Seong-ho believe it was his idea. They designed the whole thing and walked him through it backwards so he'd think he was leading. Which means the Han River operation isn't improvised. It's been prepared. The route has been assessed. The timing has been planned. The assets have been positioned. She paused. Jitai's planned to use himself as bait on that route. They're expecting it. They're waiting for it. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. I need to talk to Mr. Kang, Hyun-soo said. Where is he? Gangnam. He's moving Seo Mi-rai. Get him on the phone. He can't take a call right now. The van was moving through Yongsan toward the river, and Amara looked out the tinted window at the November morning. Gray sky, gray buildings, the Han River coming into view in the distance as a flat dark ribbon between the city's banks. And thought about Jitae standing at his penthouse window at 3 a.m. looking at that same river. "Hyun-soo," she said, "if the Han River route is compromised, what's the alternative?" Another pause. She could hear him thinking, not literally, but the particular quality of a man working through a problem he didn't have a clean solution to. There's a fallback position. Mr. Kang has a secondary property on the north side of the river. We discussed using it as a controlled environment. Who knows about it? The core security team, which includes how many people from the corporate security structure? A pause that was longer than all the previous ones. 2, Hyun-soo said. Were either of them in the building yesterday afternoon? She heard him check. She counted the seconds. 1 of them, he said. Amara closed her eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then she opened them and looked at the river. The fallback position is burned too. We don't know that. We know that one of your core security team was in the building during a coordinated briefing between Laurent's Korean assets. We know Sung-jin has had 11 years to identify every protocol your organization uses. We know Laurent doesn't run an operation without a complete contingency map. She paused. The fallback is burned. Assume it. Hyun-soo said something in Korean that she didn't understand. The tone communicated its meaning adequately. What does Jitae have that isn't in Sung-jin's file? She said. What resource? What location? What protocol that was never part of the standard operating structure? A long silence. You, Hyun-soo said. Amar held the phone. You're not in any file Sung-jin has, Hyun-soo said. You're not in any protocol. You're not in any contingency map Laurent built. You didn't exist in this operation until 2 nights ago. A pause. Which means anything you know, anything you've built, any approach you take, it's clean. They can't anticipate it. The van slowed at a traffic light. Amara looked at the laptop screen, at the footage of Da-yoon and Park Yoon-ji, at the movement map she had spent 40 minutes building, at the complete operational picture that no one on Laurent's side knew she had. Get me Jitae, she said. Whatever you have to do. Tep. Jitae called her back at 9:22 a.m. His voice was slightly compressed, not from stress, but from the acoustics of a moving vehicle, which told her Hyun-soo had reached him. She gave him everything in 4 minutes, efficiently, without repetition, the way she'd learned to give anomaly reports to the hotel's financial manager. Facts first, implications second, conclusion last. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, the line was silent for 7 seconds. The Han River route, he said. You're certain it's prepared. I'm certain Da-eun fed it to Seong-ho after a briefing that included Sung-jin. I'm certain Laurent has had at minimum 20 hours to prepare assets along that route. I'm certain they're expecting you to use it. She paused. I'm not certain of the specific method, but given their pattern, vehicle-based, timed, undetectable, I would expect the same approach with a larger asset deployment. They'll have people at 3 points on the bridge, Jitae said. Not speculation, confirmation. That's the standard protocol for that route. A pause. Sung-jin wrote that protocol. The weight of that landed without requiring elaboration. If I don't run the route, Jitae said, Seong-ho knows the plan is compromised. Daeun reports it. Laurent extracts. Yes. If I run the route, I drive into a prepared kill zone. Yes. So I run the route, Jitae said, but not the way they've prepared for. Amara thought about that. You need them to see the car on the route. You need Seong-ho and Da-eun to believe the operation is proceeding. I need more than that, Jitae said. I need Sung-jin in a position where he cannot make a call. I need Da-eun neutralized before she can report. I need Laurent's assets on the bridge committed before they realize the car is empty. And then I need to be in a position that none of them have planned for. A pause. Which requires something none of them know exists. The document, Amara said. The complete file. The financial trace. The Luxembourg subsidiary. The transaction history. If that goes to federal investigators before Laurent can extract, before, Jitae said, not after. Before I move tonight. Before the car goes on the bridge. If the financial documentation is in federal hands before the operation begins, Laurent cannot burn the evidence by burning Seoul. The case exists independently of anything that happens tonight. Amara looked at the laptop, at the 31-page document, at the complete evidentiary structure she had spent 2 nights building. I need to add the Daeyeon footage and the Sungjin building access records. Another 90 minutes. You have until 4 p.m., Jitai said. At 4, I need that file transmitted. To who? A pause. There is a federal prosecutor. Her name is Investigator Cho Hye-jin. She has been building a case against the Marchetti Network's Asian operations for 14 months. She has never had the financial spine of their Korean structure because that information was inside my organization. Another pause. She has been trying to reach me for 6 weeks. I have not returned her calls. Amara absorbed that. You're going to return one now. Through a channel she cannot trace back to either of us until after tonight, Jitai said. When the file reaches her, she'll know what it is. She'll move immediately. And if she moves before tonight, if a federal response lands on the hotel before the operation, then Seong-ho is arrested instead of trapped, Jitai said. And Laurent extracts. A pause waited. Which is why the timing of the transmission has to be exact. 4 p.m. gives Cho Hye-jin enough time to verify the file and mobilize. Not enough time to move before nightfall. Amara looked out the van window. The city moved past in its gray November light, indifferent, enormous, full of people who had no idea that in the next 12 hours, the structure of one of the most powerful criminal organizations in East Asia was going to be dismantled or consolidated depending on the outcome of a sequence of events that currently rested, in no small part, on a document she was building on a clean laptop in the back of a delivery van. There's one more thing, she said. Tell me. Seong-ho, she said. Da-yoon is managing him. She's kept him calibrated to the operation's timeline, controlled his exposure, steered his decisions. He thinks he's running this. He doesn't know Laurent has someone inside his inner circle. She paused. He doesn't know he's been managed the same way he thinks he's been managing Jitai. Silence on the line. When he finds that out, Amara said, what does he do? Jitai was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the van had covered 3 city blocks and turned twice before he answered. Seong-ho, Jitai said slowly, has spent his entire adult life believing that every failure in his life was someone else's architecture, that he was always the one being positioned, never the one in control. His voice was flat and very even. If he discovers that the woman who has been his most trusted confidant for 2 years has been Laurent's instrument, that the plan he believed he conceived was fed to him piece by piece like food to a child. A pause. He will not go quietly. He will burn everything he can reach, including Laurent, especially Laurent. Amara held that thought for a moment. Then we need him to find out. At the right moment. Another silence. Longer this time. Yes, Jitai said. We do. The line held for a moment in the particular quality of a shared understanding that didn't need more words, and then Jitai said, finish the document. I'll have Hyun-soo bring you somewhere secure. Stay off your personal phone. I know. Ms. Brooks? His voice shifted, not softer, but differently oriented, the way it had been in the sub-basement when he'd asked her what she'd seen in Seong-ho's face. What you found this morning, in the hotel. Yes. You didn't have to go back in. She thought about the loading dock door, the 40-second elevator ride, the empty corridor, the audit terminal with its familiar interface that she had logged into for the last time. I know, she said. Why did you? She looked out the window at the river, visible again now, as the van crossed toward the south bank. Flat, dark, the November sky pressing down on it without mercy. Because the third dead executive in Brussels had a daughter, she said. I found her name in the ownership restructuring documents last night. She was 19. She found out her father died in a car accident. She paused. She doesn't know yet that it wasn't an accident. The line was very quiet. Finish the document, Jitai said. The secure location Hyun-soo brought her to was a private office on the 14th floor of a commercial building in Gyeonggu, accessed through a legitimate architecture firm that occupied the floor's public-facing space and whose back offices contained a room with no windows, a standing desk, a secure network connection, and a small refrigerator stocked with water and a convenience store sandwich that Amara ate without tasting at some point around noon. She finished the document at 3:41 p.m., 19 minutes ahead of Jitai's deadline. It was 47 pages by the end. The financial spine of Celeste Laurent's Korean operation, complete and cross-referenced. The Marchetti subsidiary structure. The Luxembourg clearing entity. The 19 recipient accounts. Oh Sung-jin's 11-year transaction history. Kim Da-yoon's operational role and communication pattern. Park Yoon-ji's placement in the hotel's corporate security department. Seo Mirai's compromised administrative access and the scholarship leverage that had produced it. The surveillance footage log, time-stamped and archive referenced. The transit platform access records from the night of the first attempt. The complete movement map, everything. She read it through once from the beginning, checking for gaps, for unsupported claims, for anything that a defense attorney could use to destabilize the thread. She found 3 minor citation gaps and fixed them. She found one unsupported inferential leap in the Sung-jin section and replaced it with a factual statement of the underlying data. At 3:58 p.m., she sent the document to an encrypted relay address that Hyun-soo had given her at noon, with instructions to hold for transmission at exactly 4 p.m. At 4 p.m., she received a 2-word confirmation from Hyun-soo. It's sent. She sat back in the chair in the windowless room and looked at the ceiling and let herself have approximately 45 seconds of feeling the weight of the past 44 hours in her body. The sleeplessness, the adrenaline cycling up and down, the specific exhaustion of sustained alertness, before she straightened up and looked at her phone. A message from Jitai, sent at 3:55 p.m. Tonight, the bridge. Be ready. She looked at those 5 words for a long time. She had not been told what be ready meant in operational terms, which she understood was partly protective. The less she knew about the specific sequence, the less damage she could do if Laurent's people reached her, and partly pragmatic, because the specific sequence was Jitai's domain and always had been. But she understood the shape of what was coming. The armored sedan on the Han River Bridge, empty, driven by Min-soo at the wheel. Jitai somewhere else, in a position that Laurent hadn't planned for. Seong-ho watching the bridge from a distance, waiting for the confirmation that would never come. Da-yoon reaching for her phone at the moment she realized the operation was unraveling. And Sung-jin, somewhere in the city, making the calculation that Jitai had described, the calculation of a man protecting himself at the expense of everyone around him, and discovering that the call he intended to make had already been made for him by a 47-page document currently sitting in investigator Cho Hyejin's hands. Amara thought about Seong-ho finding out about Da-eun, about the specific kind of rage that Jitai had described. A man who believed he had always been positioned, discovering the final and most complete proof of that belief. She thought about the bridge. At 5:30 p.m., Hyun-soo came to the office. He had a dark jacket draped over one arm that he held out to her without preamble, and she understood it was not a fashion suggestion. She put it on. It was heavier than it looked. She didn't ask why. "Where are we going?" she said. "The north side of the river," Hyun-soo said. "There's a position above the bridge approach, line of sight to the operation point. You're putting me in the field. Mr. Kang wants you in a position where you can access the hotel's camera feeds remotely. Da-yoon and Park Yoon-ji are still in the building. When the operation begins, he needs real-time surveillance on their locations." Amara nodded. That she could do. That was the work. "And Sung-jin?" she said. "Mr. Kang is handling Sung-jin personally." She didn't ask what that meant. They went down through the architecture firm's lobby and out into the November evening, and the city was dark now with the early darkness of winter. And the river was a black presence at the bottom of the skyline, visible between buildings. And the bridge was out there somewhere with Laurent's people already in position, already waiting, already certain they were watching the final hours of Kang Jitai's life from a prepared and unassailable distance. The van moved through the evening traffic toward the river. Amara opened the clean laptop and connected to the hotel's camera system through the remote access protocol she had set up that morning before she'd fled the audit office, and pulled up the feed for the 14th floor. Room 1407. Da-yoon's room. Daeun was inside. Seated on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, phone in her hand, watching the window with the focused stillness of someone who was waiting for a signal that everything was proceeding on schedule. Amara watched her. The van reached the North Bank approach, and Hyun-soo guided it into a parking structure 2 blocks from the bridge, up to the 5th level where the exterior wall had an open section with a direct sightline to the bridge span, and they stopped. Below them, the Han River Bridge stretched across the black water of the November River, lit by its even spacing of overhead lamps, utterly quiet at this hour, carrying its light evening traffic with the indifferent flow of a structure that had no knowledge of what it was about to become. At 7:15 p.m., Hyun-soo's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face did something very precise and very controlled. "The car is moving," he said. Amara looked at the bridge, looked at the laptop screen where Da-eun sat on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hand, looked back at the bridge. Somewhere behind them, in the organized dark of a city that was mostly going about its evening without any awareness of what was threading through it, the armored Hyena S-600 was moving toward the bridge approach with Min-soo at the wheel and no one in the back seat, and the weight of everything that had been built and burned and salvaged over the past 48 hours riding in the empty air of its interior. And somewhere in that same dark, Kang Ji-tae was moving toward a position that Celeste Laurent had not prepared for. Amara's phone buzzed. A message from Ji-tae. 4 words. "Watch Seong-ho, not the bridge." She switched the feed, pulled up the hotel corridor camera for the floor below the penthouse, where the security team's monitoring station had eyes on Seong-ho's movements. Seong-ho was in the corridor. He was not watching the bridge from his window. He was standing in the hallway outside his suite with his phone to his ear, and even through the camera's distant angle and imperfect resolution, she could see that something in the conversation he was having had changed the configuration of his face entirely. He lowered the phone. He looked at it. Then he turned and looked directly at the door of the suite next to his, the suite that Amara's access log research had confirmed was registered under Da-eun's corporate alias, with an expression that she could read from 47 pages of documentation and 2 nights of work and the specific knowledge of what he had just been told. Someone had told him about Da-eun. Ji-tae had told him about Da-eun. The bridge was a decoy, not just for Laurent, for Seong-ho, to get him looking one direction while everything assembled behind him in the other. On the bridge below, she could see the headlights of the S-600 beginning their crossing. On the hotel feed, Seong-ho was walking toward Da-eun's suite door with the contained and terrible momentum of a man who had just discovered the final proof of everything he had always feared and who had decided in the space of a single breath exactly what he was going to do about it. And somewhere in the dark above the bridge, in a position that none of Laurent's prepared assets were watching because none of them knew it existed, Ji-tae was already. The position Ji-tae had chosen was a maintenance walkway on the underside of the Mapo Bridge's northern approach structure, a rusted steel platform originally designed for inspection crews, accessed through a locked utility door in the bridge's concrete support pillar that Sung Jin's 11 years of organizational intelligence had never included because Ji-tae had found it himself alone on a night 7 years ago when he had needed somewhere to think that no one who worked for him would think to look. He had never told anyone about it, not Hyun-soo, not Min-soo, not the man who had sat with him for 3 hours after his father died and helped him write the speech that held the organization together through its most dangerous transition. Not Seong-ho. He stood on the walkway in the dark above the river with 4 of his most trusted operatives positioned at the bridge's approach points and watched the S-600's headlights complete their crossing 200 meters downstream on the parallel span, moving at exactly the pace Min-soo had been instructed to maintain. Unhurried, routine, the nightly drive of a man who did not know he was being watched. Laurent's people were watching. He could feel them without seeing them, the way you felt weather coming before it arrived. A pressure in the operational air, a quality of the dark that was different from ordinary dark. Hyun-soo had confirmed 3 vehicle positions along the bridge approach in the hour before the operation began, each one occupied by a single individual, each positioned at the precise intervals that the Black Phoenix's own route security protocol specified for maximum coverage of the bridge span. Sung Jin's protocol. Written by the man who now sat in a room in Gangnam with 2 of Ji-tae's most reliable people and no working phone, having been collected from his office building at 6:45 p.m. with the particular efficiency of an organization that had been planning the collection for 14 hours. Sung-jin had not resisted. He had looked at the two men who came for him with the expression of a man who had been waiting, on some level, for exactly this arrival, and had gone with them without a word, carrying only the weight of 11 years of quiet betrayal and whatever he had told himself about it in the dark. Jitai had not been there for the collection. He had not trusted himself to be. Now he stood above the river and watched the S-600 complete its crossing and disappear into the South Bank's traffic flow, and he counted the seconds, and he waited. At 7:31 p.m., one of the three vehicles on the bridge approach turned its engine on. At 7:32 p.m., it moved toward the bridge. At 7:33 p.m., Hyun-soo's voice came through Ji-tae's earpiece. "They're committing. All three vehicles moving." Ji-tae pressed the transmit button on his radio twice, the signal that meant now. The response came not in sound but in light. The bridge approach illuminated suddenly and completely by a coordinated activation of portable floodlights positioned by his operatives at all three vehicle locations simultaneously, turning the nighttime approach into something that functioned like a stage with the curtain unexpectedly raised. Three vehicles, three drivers with no exits, surrounded before any of them had completed the turn onto the bridge span. It happened in 40 seconds. He heard it more than saw it. Voices, the specific controlled shouting of men executing a containment under pressure, one door opening and being immediately closed again, a sound that might have been a weapon being disarmed or might have been something being dropped. Then silence. Then Hyun-soo's voice, even, professional, stripped of everything except the information. 3 assets contained, no casualties. Ji-tae stood on the maintenance walkway above the Black River and breathed. The air tasted like cold water and steel. Below him, the river moved without any knowledge of what had just happened on its surface, carrying its darkness toward the sea with the indifference of things that would be here long after everyone involved in this night was gone. He stood there for another 30 seconds, not because he needed to, because he allowed himself 30 seconds to be a man standing above a river on a cold November night, feeling the specific gravity of what it meant to still be alive. Then he went back up through the utility door and toward the bridge. Amara watched Sung-ho reach Da-eun's suite door on the hotel camera feed at 7:28 p.m., 3 minutes before Ji-tae's operation on the bridge went active. She watched him knock. 2 sharp impacts, knuckles on door. She could not hear it through the camera feed, but she could see the movement of his arm, the controlled violence of it. Da-eun opened the door. For a moment, they simply stood there, framed in the doorway of the suite, and Amara could see both their faces clearly in the corridor camera's angle, Da-eun's expression moving through a rapid sequence of assessments, professional composure held over something that was shifting underneath it, and Seong-ho's face, which was doing nothing at all except being exactly what it was, which was the face of a man who had in the past 48 hours lost everything he had built, and discovered that most of what he'd built had been built for him by other people. He said something. Da-eun's composure completed its collapse. Not dramatically. It didn't shatter, it simply withdrew, like a tide going out, leaving behind the real surface underneath. She said something back. He stepped forward. She did not step back. They stood close together in the doorway for a long moment, speaking in the quick, stripped exchanges of people who were past the point of performance. And Amara watched it with the feeling of watching something that should have been private, and which she was watching anyway because this was the job. This had been the job for 3 years, observing the private lives of people behind glass at 3 in the morning. Except this was different from all of those other times. Because this time she was not a neutral observer. This time the conversation in that doorway was part of a sequence of events that she had set in motion, and its outcome was not academic. At 7:34 p.m., Hyun-soo came up beside her in the parking structure and said quietly, "Bridge is contained." She exhaled. "Seong-ho," she said, indicating the laptop screen without looking away from it. Hyun-soo looked at the feed. "Where's our team?" "Hall camera shows them at the elevator bank. They haven't moved in yet." She paused. "He's still talking to her." Hyun-soo watched the screen. "What is he doing?" Amara looked at Seong-ho's posture. The set of his shoulders, the angle of his head, the particular stillness of a man who was not moving and not threatening and not doing anything that looked like the rage Jitai had predicted. He looked like a man conducting a conversation he had needed to have for a long time. "I think he's asking her questions," she said, "and I think she's answering them." Jitai arrived at the hotel at 8:10 p.m. Amara knew this because Hyun-soo received the notification and relayed it to her in the van on the way back across the river. They had been moving since 7:40, when Hyun-soo had judged the bridge containment stable enough to relocate, and she felt the particular quality of a sequence of events approaching its terminal point the way you felt the end of a very long night approaching. Not with relief exactly, but with the altered weight of something that was about to change from ongoing to completed. Jitai went to Seongho. He did not go to the bridge assets which were being managed by his operatives. He did not go to Sungjin, who was still in the Gangnam room. He went directly to the hotel, to the floor where Seong-ho was standing in a doorway talking to the woman who had spent 2 years managing him on behalf of the person who had arranged his brother's murder. And he walked down that corridor with Min-soo on one side and 2 operatives on the other, and the specific gravity of a man who had something to say that could not be delegated. Amara was not there for that conversation. She would learn its contents in pieces over the following hours, from Hyun-soo's spare account, from Min-soo's even sparer account, from the few things Jitai himself said about it in the days afterward, and from what she could reconstruct from the camera footage that showed, without audio, the shape of what happened. What the footage showed was this: Jitai arriving at the doorway where Seong-ho and Da-yoon were standing, Da-yoon stepping back, away from the door, allowing the hallway to become the space between 2 brothers. Jitai's operatives securing Da-yoon without violence and walking her toward the elevator bank, and then Jitai and Seong-ho, alone in the corridor except for Min-soo at a respectful distance, standing 3 feet apart. They stood that way for what the timestamp indicated was 4 minutes and 22 seconds. Amara, watching the silent feed on the laptop in the van, could not read the words. She could read the bodies. The way Jitai stood with his hands at his sides and his back straight, the way Seong-ho stood with his shoulders pulled in, the way the space between them contained something that was not violence and not forgiveness, but existed in the register between them, where those 2 things had once both been possible. She watched Seong-ho's face do what faces did when the last performance was no longer possible. She had seen it once before, in a photograph, and it had made her print that photograph and carry it down to a parking garage. Seeing it in real time in the corridor camera's imperfect resolution was a different thing. It was the face of someone arriving at the end of a very long act of self-destruction and finding at the bottom of it not the freedom they had been reaching for, but simply the fact of what they had done. He did not fight. He did not run. He stood in the corridor and he let Jitai's operatives take him, and the last thing the camera captured before they moved out of the frame was Seong-ho turning his head once to look back at his brother, and Jitai standing still, watching him go. Celeste Laurent was taken at Incheon International Airport at 11:45 p.m. She had booked a flight under one of her secondary identities, an alias that did not appear in any of the documentation Amara had provided to investigator Cho Hye-jin, because Amara had not known about it. Cho Hye-jin's team had found it through a parallel intelligence thread that the investigator had been building independently for 14 months, and which the 47-page document had given sufficient probable cause to activate in full. Amara learned this at 12:30 a.m. from Hyun-soo, who told her with the same verbal economy he applied to everything, and she sat with it for a moment in the safe apartment in Dongjak-gu. A different one from before, on a different floor, smelling of the same fresh paint over the same older smell, and processed the specific texture of a sequence of events coming to its end. Laurent had been at the gate. 20 minutes from boarding, she had been calm when Cho Hye-jin's people reached her. Hyun-soo relayed this detail with something in his voice that was not quite surprise but adjacent to it. The particular calm of someone who had been in high-risk situations before and understood that composure was its own form of information management. She had asked for a lawyer before she had asked any question. She had looked at the agents around her and done the calculation of someone assessing a legal situation, not panicking in a personal one. She had not looked, by any witness account, like someone who believed this was survivable. She had looked like someone managing the quality of their own defeat. Amara thought about the 3 dead executives in Europe, about the girl in Brussels who was 19 years old and still believed her father had died in an accident, She thought about Laurent's composed face at the departure gate, calculating, managing, the professional machinery of a woman who had built a killing operation inside the architecture of legitimate business, and who even now, arrested at an airport, was treating this as a logistical problem to be navigated. She hoped the 47 pages were enough. She was fairly certain they were. Oh Sung-jin gave a full statement at 9 a.m. the following morning. Amara learned this not from Hyun-soo, but from investigator Cho Hye-jin herself, who called the secure phone at 10:15 a.m. and spoke to Amara for 22 minutes in precise, slightly formal English that communicated through its precision a great deal about the quality of Cho's mind and the depth of her preparation for this conversation. Cho had questions. Amara answered them. They were good questions. Specific, technically grounded, the questions of someone who had read the 47 pages carefully and understood what they contained and what they implied. Amara answered with the same factual directness she had used in building the document, providing clarifications where the evidentiary chain needed contextualizing and declining, twice, to provide interpretations that went beyond what the data supported. At the end of the call, Cho said, "The document you provided is the most complete financial forensic record of a transnational criminal operation I have received in 14 years of this work." Amara didn't know what to say to that. "I had good source material," she said. "You had source material that most investigators with full legal authority and a team of analysts couldn't have assembled." A pause. "You built this alone, overnight, with audit terminal access and an eye for financial anomaly. That's what night auditors do," Amara said. Cho was quiet for a moment. Then, "I will need a formal statement from you. At your convenience, but within the next 72 hours. "I understand. Miss Brooks." Cho's voice shifted slightly. Not warm, but human in a way it hadn't quite been in the preceding 22 minutes. "What you did required considerable courage. I want you to know that I recognize that." Amara held the phone and looked at the apartment window and the gray November morning outside it. "It required not being able to not do it," she said. "That's different from courage." Another pause. "Perhaps," Cho said. "In my experience, they're often the same thing." Mom. She saw Jitai 4 days later. The immediate operational aftermath had required those 4 days. The federal processing, the statements, the 47 pages being entered formally into evidence, the parallel proceedings in 3 European jurisdictions that Cho Hye-jin's office coordinated with a speed that suggested the document had unlocked investigative threads that had been waiting, pre-prepared for exactly this material. Seo Mireille cooperated fully and immediately, as Amara had suspected she would. Park Yoon-ji from the hotel's corporate security department was arrested on the second day. Kim Dae-yoon's statement, provided voluntarily and at length, contained details about Laurent's Korean operation that even Amara's document hadn't reached. Sung-ho was charged on the morning of the 3rd day. The charging document listed organized crime conspiracy, attempted murder, and international financial fraud. He had not spoken publicly since his arrest. His lawyer had issued a single statement that said nothing. Sung-jin's cooperation had been comprehensive enough to generate a separate and significantly longer charging document with 15 additional counts that Amara did not fully read, because reading it, she found, produced a specific kind of exhaustion that was different from the exhaustion of work and more difficult to recover from. She had given her formal statement to Cho Hye-jin on the 2nd day in an office in the federal building in Seocho, in a room that smelled of old paper and central heating, for 3 hours. She had been precise and organized, and had brought a printed copy of the document with her own annotations, which Cho had accepted without comment, and which Amara suspected had saved them approximately 40 minutes of cross-referencing. On the 4th day, Jitai's assistant called the secure phone and asked, with careful courtesy, whether Ms. Brooks was available for a meeting at a time of her choosing. She chose 7 p.m. They met at the Yongsan restaurant again. The same back room, same round table, same locked door. But Jitai was alone this time. No Hyun-soo at the door, no Min-soo in the corner. Just the two of them, and the table between them, and a bottle of something that he poured into 2 glasses without asking, which she took as a reasonable assumption under the circumstances. He looked tired. Genuinely tired, in a way that the previous days had not permitted him to show. The specific tiredness that moved into a person when the operational necessity that had been holding them upright was removed, and the body finally sent the bill for what the preceding week had cost. There were lines around his eyes that she thought might be new. There was a quality about the set of his shoulders that was different from the controlled architecture she had observed in the sub-basement and the maintenance corridors and the Yongsan back room 4 days ago. He looked like a man who had finished something very large and was now sitting in the space where that thing used to be. "How are you?" he asked. The question surprised her, not because it was unexpected, but because of how straightforwardly he asked it. Not as preamble, not as courtesy, but as a genuine inquiry. "Tired," she said. "Functional." He nodded. "The statement with Cho Hyejin. 3 hours. She's thorough. She's the best federal prosecutor in the country," Jitai said. "I have been trying to avoid her for 6 weeks. You mentioned. I should have returned her call 5 weeks earlier." He picked up his glass. Held it. "That is one of approximately 11 things I should have done differently." Amara looked at him. "The document," she said. "I included things that put your organization in a complicated position, legally." "Yes. The Ro Jae-won settlement. The administrative access that Seo Mirai had to your corporate systems. The overlap between the hotel's corporate structure and the syndicate's legitimate arm." She paused. "Cho Hyejin asked me about all of it." "I know," Jitai said. "I spoke with her yesterday." "And?" He set the glass down. "There is a framework being discussed, a cooperation agreement in exchange for a restructuring of the corporate arm that creates a genuine separation between the legitimate operations and the other operations." He paused. "It is not a comfortable framework." "Is it survivable?" He met her eyes. "Legally?" "Yes. The corporate structure survives. What doesn't survive is the ambiguity I've been operating in for 17 years, it is an appropriate loss, I think." The honesty of that landed in the room without requiring any response. Amara picked up her own glass and drank from it. It was good whiskey, the kind of whiskey that communicated the price without announcing it. "Seung-ho," she said. Jitai looked at the table for a moment. "He'll be convicted. The evidence is complete. His lawyer knows it's complete." A pause. "He's decided not to contest the financial fraud counts. He's contesting the conspiracy charge." Another pause. "His argument is that he was manipulated into a position where he believed he had no alternative. Is that true?" Jitai was quiet for a long time. "Yes and no," he said finally. "Sung-jin positioned him. Laurent cultivated him. Da-yun managed him. All of that is true." He turned his glass in his hands. He was also a man who spent 4 years watching his brother run an empire that he wanted, and making choices, one by one, that led him toward a door he knew perfectly well what was on the other side of. He paused. The manipulation gave him the path. He still chose to walk it. Amara held that. "What did you say to him in the corridor at the hotel?" Jitai looked up. Something moved across his face. Not grief exactly, but something in the same family. "I told him what I told you I would tell him," he said. "That he didn't betray the Mafia boss. He betrayed the brother who gave him everything." And he said, Jitai stopped. Started again. "He said that the brother who gave him everything was also the reason he had nothing that was his own." A pause. He said it quietly, not as an accusation, as a fact he'd been carrying for a long time. The room was very still. "Was he right?" Amara asked. Jitai held her gaze. The question sat between them without apology and without softening. And she held it there because it was the honest question, and because she had spent 4 days thinking about it, and because Jitai, she had learned, was not a man who responded well to questions that protected him from their own implications. "In part," he said, "I built something large and I brought him into it and I told myself it was generosity. It was also control. The kind that doesn't announce itself." He paused. "The kind that looks from the outside and from the inside like love." Another pause. "I've been thinking about the difference for 4 days. I don't have a complete answer yet." She nodded. That was honest. It was more honest than most people were capable of being about the things they'd built and the damage they'd done while building them, and she acknowledged it without making it into something more than it was. "I want to offer you something," Jitai said. The hotel told me I don't have a job anymore, Amara said. I assume that was you. The hotel's corporate structure is being restructured as part of the cooperation framework, he said. The night audit position no longer exists in its current form. A pause. But I would like you to consider a different position. Chief Risk and Compliance Officer of the Dojin Global Group, overseeing the complete reconstruction of the corporate security and compliance infrastructure. Amara looked at him. That's a real job, she said. It's a very real job, with a very real scope and a very real authority structure and a salary that... He named a figure that she absorbed without expression, though her internal response was somewhat louder than her external one. The mandate is to rebuild every system in the corporate arm from the ground up, with specific attention to the vulnerabilities that this past week exposed. You want the person who documented every vulnerability in your organization to be the one who fixes them. I want the person who found things in my organization that 11 years of professional intelligence and 14 months of federal investigation hadn't found, Jitai said, to be the person who ensures that those things cannot be missed again. Amara held the offer in the space of the room and looked at it from different angles. It was not a small thing. It was not a simple thing. It was a job that existed inside the structure of an organization that she now knew more about than most of the people who worked for it. And it came from a man who had spent 17 years operating in the productive ambiguity between legal and otherwise, and who was now, under federal pressure and his own apparent reckoning, attempting to rebuild something on different foundations. She thought about what it meant to accept. She thought about what it meant not to. She thought about 3 years of watching from behind glass. I want final authority on compliance decisions, she said. Not recommendations that go up a chain. Final authority documented in my contract. Yes. I want direct access to every financial system in the corporate arm. Not read access. Audit access, including the ability to flag and hold transactions pending review. Yes. And I want the Roe J1 settlement funds returned to his family, anonymously, with no conditions attached to the return. Jitai looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression shifted, not surprise, but something adjacent to recognition. That was already on my list, he said. Then we agree, Amara said. She picked up her glass. He picked up his. They did not toast. That would have been the wrong register for what this was. But they drank at the same moment, which was something. The months that followed were not easy months. Rebuilding a compromised security infrastructure from the inside required a particular combination of technical rigor and political endurance that Amara had not fully anticipated. And there were days in the first 3 months when she went home to her apartment in Mapogu. A different one from before, higher floor, a window that faced the river, with the specific exhaustion of someone who was fighting a war on a terrain where the landmines were the legacy decisions of the previous regime and the booby traps were the institutional habits of people who had been doing things the old way for so long that they had stopped seeing them as choices. She built the system anyway, methodically, document by document, protocol by protocol, the same way she had built the 47 pages, starting from the discrepancy, working toward the source, finding the number that didn't match, and pulling that thread until the larger structure was visible. Cho Hye-jin's prosecution took 11 months. Both Celeste Laurent and Kang Seong-ho were convicted on all major counts. Laurent received 18 years across consolidated charges from 3 European jurisdictions and the Korean proceedings, which her defense team immediately began appealing on 17 grounds, which Cho Hye-jin had anticipated and for which she had prepared specific responses in advance. Seong-ho received 9 years, reduced from the prosecutorial recommendation following the cooperation agreement that his lawyer negotiated in the 8th month of proceedings, based on his provision of intelligence regarding the Marchetti Network's other Asian operations. Jitai did not attend either sentencing. Amara did not ask him whether he had wanted to. Oh Sung-jin received 11 years. He did not appeal. He had, by all accounts, understood the shape of his situation from the moment the 2 men came to collect him from the Gangnam office building, and had adjusted his strategy accordingly. On the day Laurent's conviction was confirmed, Amara was in her office on the 23rd floor of the Dojin Global Group's Gangnam headquarters, reviewing the 3rd iteration of the new access credential protocol that her team had spent 6 weeks developing, when Jitai knocked on the open door and said he wanted to show her something. They drove in the gray car, not the S600, which had been retired from active service and now sat in a corporate storage facility in a choice that Amara suspected was deliberate, through the evening traffic of the city, south toward the river. And Amara did not ask where they were going because she had a fair idea. The Grand Sierra Hotel's underground parking garage at 11 months' remove was the same as it had been. The same fluorescent light on the same poured concrete, the same smell of exhaust and expensive rubber, the same configuration of spots and pillars, and the maintenance access door set into the far wall. Jitai had arranged for it to be cleared of vehicles, which made it larger than it had seemed on the night it contained everything that had happened. And the empty spaces had a particular quality of absences that knew what they used to hold. Spot B7 was empty. Had been empty, by Jitai's private instruction, since the night of the operation. They stood near the pillar where she had waited for 11 minutes in the dark. She didn't feel what she had expected to feel, which was some version of the fear and the calculated risk, and the cold arithmetic of that night. What she felt was quieter than that, and harder to name, the specific weight of a place that had become, without her consent, the location where one version of her life had ended, and whatever came after it had begun. Cho Hyejin called me this morning, Jitai said. The confirmation? Yes. He paused. She also said, she asked me to pass something along to you. She said the financial documentation you provided was entered into the international case as foundational evidence, that it's being used in 3 ongoing investigations in Europe that she can't yet name. He paused again. She said it changed what was possible. Amara looked at spot B7, at the empty concrete, at the maintenance door, at the fluorescent light above it casting its flat practical light on the same surfaces it had been casting it on that night, indifferent and constant. She thought about the girl in Brussels who still didn't know. Will she be told? Amara asked. The daughter. In Brussels. I don't know, Jitai said. That's Cho's jurisdiction. But the conviction creates a pathway legally for the family to seek the truth about the manner of death. He paused. I made a call to a Brussels attorney 3 months ago. I made it without telling you, which I should correct. Amara looked at him. A call on behalf of the family, Jitai said, offering support for a civil inquiry, not connected to the criminal proceedings. He met her eyes, anonymously. She held that. Then, thank you. It was already on my list, he said quietly. They stood in the empty garage for another moment, in the fluorescent light, in the exhaust and leather smell of a space that had been the beginning of this and was now something after the end of it. You trusted a stranger, Amara said. Jitai looked toward the maintenance hallway. No, he said. I trusted the only person brave enough to tell me the truth. The sentence had the feeling of something he had been carrying since the night she had first said it, turned over and examined and arrived at from the other side. She heard the weight in it, not sentiment, not performance, but the specific gravity of a man who had spent a year learning the difference between what he had said in the moment and what he understood it to mean now. She looked at spot B7 one more time. Then she turned toward the elevator. Jitai fell into step beside her and they walked across the empty garage in the flat fluorescent light. Past the pillar, past the maintenance door, past the space where an armored car had once idled with a wrong man behind the wheel, toward the elevator bank at the far end. Behind them, the garage held its silence. The fluorescent light kept its vigil over the empty concrete. Spot B7 remained what it had become, not the place where a man had almost died, but the place where someone had decided, at the cost of everything it cost, that watching was no longer enough. The elevator doors opened. They stepped inside. The doors closed, and the garage was empty. And the light was the same as it had always been, and the city continued above it in all its noise and ambition and ordinary human motion, 11 million people going about the business of their lives in the particular darkness of a November night that held, as all nights held, the complete and unremarkable fact of what people were capable of when they stopped looking away.